Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live today from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios. Training camp has arrived. Training camp has started. Hallelujah. We made it. We made it. Ian is here today. Ian, we made it.
Congratulations to everyone.
And congratulations to you. And congratulations to you, the fans, because we have made it. I don't know if I've told you guys this. I think I've said this before on the radio. I get depressed usually on like Thursday of Super Bowl week because after the Monday after the Super Bowl, it's like, man, I feel like I'm staring off into the abyss. Now, that's not really what happens because the way the NFL is now with the extra game and the extra week and everything else, it's like we go right to the combine, which starts next year, and then right to free agency, and then right to the draft. And so I know that we'll get by. I know that we'll make it. We had an exciting run where the Predators got red hot down the stretch, had a little college baseball in there after the draft. But guys, we made it. There's no way around it. We made it. We have survived. And training camp has started today. So in the past, when it comes to the Titans and training camp, I've gone as much as I can go, or I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I go every day. You know, some days, especially on the weekends, I'd rather be out on the lake. But I would say, Ian, I go to more than my fair share of training camp practices. I think that's fair to say.
You go to a fair amount, yeah.
I think that's, and we recap them, right? Like we talk about Levis was 8 of 13. He had 1 interception. A ball was tipped in the air, and it was intercepted by Elijah Molden. And then there was one where DeAndre Hopkins, and we do all that. And we're going to do all that this year. But I was listening to Brian Callahan today. I even asked him a question about mistakes being made and how to tolerate mistakes, knowing that, hey, we're trying to get better, but we have to figure out what we're capable of doing before we. I thought he had a pretty good answer about, hey, you know, in the games, it's a little different than it's going to be in practice. And it just kind of hit me. And it hit me when I saw this picture circulating. Donald Page is the team photographer for the Titans. And he posted on Instagram a picture of Will Levis's car as the first car that was parked in the garage for training camp today. And Titans fans were blowing that up on Twitter, being like, oh my God, QB1, he is ready. And it kind of set the tone for how I am going to approach training camp. And that is, unlike years past, I am not looking for training camp to give me any indication about what this football team is going to be this year. In the past, I've looked at training camp as kind of a mirror for the games. Whoever plays well in training camp is probably going to play well in the game. Whoever plays poorly in training camp is probably going to be a reflection of what we're going to see during the season. We saw that with Ryan Tannehill's interception fest in 2021, which led to that bad season that he had. I, again, have told the story that on day 3 of camp last year, before they even put the pads on, I walked out of the facility, called my dad, and said, this offensive line is horrible. So there can be things that give us an indication of what's going to be, but I've also taken a lot of bait over the years. Last year, it was Chig and Burks. I watched those two guys in training camp, and I thought they were both going to have breakout seasons. Then we played ball, and they couldn't even catch it. So I'm approaching this year differently than I have in the past. In 2022, the Titans entered the season on the heels of being the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. There was optimism, there was discussion that this team could be or should be a Super Bowl contender based upon where they finished the year before. The 2024 Titans do not have that. In 2023, the Titans were 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but they would never, ever, ever, ever say that they were rebuilding. They would never, ever, with Henry and Tannehill, they would never, ever, ever give us an indication that they didn't think they could compete. which meant that every day at camp, it was about competing. It was about, and man, this defense is dominant. They're going to be, because we were thinking they could have a good season. That's not where the 2024 Titans are. The 2024 Titans are rebuilding. The 2024 Titans, and forget about the age of Calvin Ridley or the age of DeAndre Hopkins or that. Don't worry about that. The age of the core players, it's low. The core players on this team, the guys that are going to matter if this core ends up competing for a Super Bowl, and there is no guarantee that they will or they won't, but the core of this team is Levis, Skoronski, Latham. That's kind of your core. Spears, Sweat, that's the core of the team. All the other guys, like, they're just Band-Aids. They're DeMarco Murray. And that's okay. You need DeMarco Murray. The Byard and Lewan and Delaney, or Derrick Henry, they needed Delaney. They needed DeMarco Murray. But that's what those guys are. This team, where they sit right now, reminds me of Mike Mularkey's first year when he inherited a 3-13 team, had a second-year quarterback. They were picking first in the draft. And we didn't think, until they went to Kansas City in -5-degree temperatures and Ryan Suckup hit like a 60-yarder to win the game in December, we didn't think that team was competing for anything that year. We just thought that team was on track to get better. And that's where I see this team right now. So when it comes to training camp, I'll be out there. But if Will Levis, who's trying to learn a new offense, who's working with a new coach, who has a new coach who's trying to figure him out, if Will Levis goes out there and he goes 9 of 24 with 3 interceptions, 1 for Awuzie, 1 for Snead, 1 for Jack Gibbons on a tip ball, and I'm not going to panic, because, again, what happens in July and August, that's practice so that they can get better for the games. Now, if you think your team is a Super Bowl contender, then what matters in July and August does apply to the games, because you want to win in September. But I don't think the Titans have the kind of team where we should be expecting them to win in September. We should expect them, again, just like practice, we should expect them to grow throughout the course of the year. That first year with Mike Mularkey, again, they finished 9-7. They were in the playoff race the last 3 of the last 4 weeks of the season. That team started 1-3. It's going to be a process. I have talked time and time again about last year's Green Bay Packers. Now, I know the Green Bay Packers have a proud history of competing, but I don't think after Aaron Rodgers left, after the Aaron Crew, Alan Lazard, and Randall Cobb, and all those guys that they had won with over the years, after all those guys left, and it was kind of a young group with Aaron Jones and this Jordan Love, we'll see. And it was that group in Green Bay. I don't think Green Bay fans thought this team's going to be in the divisional round of the playoffs. This team's going to have San Francisco dead to rights. But what happened was they got better throughout the course of the year. They were 3-6 at one point. They were 3-6. They were dead. They were in the midst of a losing streak. They had lost, I believe, 8 games, something like that. I think they were like 6-8. And they got Carolina, who's the worst team in the league, and beat them by 3 points. And they didn't lose again into the division round of the playoffs, which, again, is a long-winded way of me saying it's a rebuild, guys. And in a rebuild, that doesn't mean that you can't make the playoffs. There are 7 teams that get in, so you could sneak in some way, somehow. You could get better throughout the course of the year. Again, just like Green Bay. But in a rebuild, I'm not thinking about Chicago. Last year, I was thinking about New Orleans. The year before that, I was thinking about the Giants. I'm not thinking about Chicago. I'm not. I'm thinking about, okay, they're going to get out there tomorrow, and let's see how Levis performs. And then the next day, let's see how Levis performs. And let's hope that Levis is better by the end of camp than he is at the beginning of camp. Let's hope that Levis is better in week 4 than he is in week 1. Let's hope that he's better in week 10 than he is in week 6. That's where the Titans are this year. And I'm okay with that. That's why we set the expectation yesterday, and it ended up being 5 wins. That's okay. So I'm not going to watch somebody go crazy like the Titans defense did last year and come on here after training camp and say, oh, the defense, they're so good. Remember Kevin Byard said, we think we'd be the best in the league. Average defense. I'm not doing that this year. Chig and Burks, they could catch 100 balls every practice, and it will not matter to me. But this is a different training camp because I think for the first time we can all admit the Titans are in a different spot than they have thought that they were, or we have thought that they were in years past. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in, 615-737-1025. Now, yesterday I said Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon are meeting with the media, and all we're really excited about working hard. I'm like, that stuff doesn't matter. I said there were 5 things that really mattered, and all 5, for the most part, got answered. We'll hit that next. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. Folks, we have made it. Football season is here. 1025, 1063 The Game.
talked about a lot how there's been so many things on your plate for the last 7 months or whatever it is. One, just how excited are you to be to this day, to have a team here to start the season? And two, what was your message to them when you first met them?
Our first team meeting, official team meeting, is after this. So that'll be the messaging when I get there. But I'm I get to certain points in the summer and you can't wait to get started again, and it's always my favorite time of year is when training camp starts. Obviously there's optimism and things are good and it's exciting. It's a fun time of year. I love training camp. It's one of my favorite parts of football. So to be here and be the head coach of the Titans in my first year and my first training camp is pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie to you. And I'm excited to get going. And again, it's a pretty cool moment for me to be able to be up here talking about training camp. And it won't always be this exciting and this optimistic, but it is right now, and I'm going to enjoy it.
There you go. That was Brian Callahan earlier today, and that probably gets you fired up for camp, right? Yeah. All right, coach. Well, that doesn't really matter. And I'm not here to knock the local news like the TV news, but if you watch the news when it comes on, I think it comes on at 4, 5, 6, and 10. Sounds about right, Ian?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay. They'll do their minute 30 for sports. And when they do their minute 30 for sports, they'll have a cut like that in the middle of it. The Titans have opened training camp for the 2024 season, and head coach Brian Callahan is very excited to get started. And then they run that cut. But that doesn't really matter. Of course he's excited for camp. They always say things like that. I said yesterday at the 5 o'clock hour, I said there are 5 things that are going to come out of this that are actually kind of important. Number 1, will T'Vondre Sweat pass his conditioning test? Number 2, what about PT? Number 3, are they done at safety after Jamal Adams, i.e., are they still going to be in on Justin Simmons? Or is it going to be, some kind of practice squad Scarbini that it may have to get their way into the lineup? Number 4, what about Chad Brinker? I thought he was president and Rand's, what about that? And number 5, are they considering signing DeAndre Hopkins long term? So, number 1 was T'Vondre Sweat. Brian Callahan asked about T'Vondre Sweat.
What's the latest with T'Vondre Sweat? I know coming back, conditioning and all that. How did he fare?
He looks good. He looks ready to roll. Don't expect any issues as we get started. He should be dressed and practicing and ready to play football.
Okay. Number 1 answered. Check. He passed the conditioning test. As Brian Callahan said, he's ready to go. He doesn't think there's going to be any issue, which means we get to see the big boy out there tomorrow, and we get to see, okay, those fast feet going to match that big ass. And is he going to be able to help that defensive line replicate the 11.5 sacks that they're missing from Danico Autry? Are we going to see if T'Vondre Sweat, at whatever size he is, somebody texted in and said, what's Sweat weigh? They're never going to tell you. But are we going to see if he can make it through the practices? Can he live up to what they say they think he's worth? Now, remember, there was an unnamed scout in the Athlon guide, the little Athlon guide you can buy at the grocery store. There was an unnamed scout that said, we took him off our board because we just didn't believe. So we're now going to see, can T'Vondre Sweat fulfill the promise? But he says he's in shape. That's a good start. Number 2 was Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a.
PT.
Was PT actually ready to compete at right tackle? Because, as I said, he's gotten every free pass in the book. Oh, he was suspended for gambling, not his fault. Oh, he was terrible, not his fault. Oh, he got hurt, not his fault. Oh, he didn't show up in the offseason, but not his fault. Just all those. It's just constant. So where are we on Nicholas Petit-Frere once again, a.k.a.
PT?
Just to clarify for him, just so everybody's on the same page, his injury is not his pup is not related to his shoulder. His shoulder has been cleared, it's healed. It's related to a cleanup. He had a cleanup surgery in the offseason after the first couple of weeks of our program, and had a little issue to clean up, and really that's what that is. And so he's just coming off of that. Should be good in a few days' time, but he'll start officially on the active pup. So other than that, everyone else is cleared and healthy and ready to roll. So we're in a pretty good place health-wise. We'll have some guys that we manage over the course of training camp in terms of load and guys that are a little bit older and all that stuff. But other than that, we were healthy going into camp, which is where you want to be. And I'm excited to get rolling. So
he will be on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. Anybody else here in their head? We don't have a right tackle, because that's what I hear in my head. Number 3, are they done at safety after adding Jamal Adams, or are they still in the running for Justin Simmons? There's a little, the Adams deals league minimum. Rand Carthon, are you done at safety? Are you done at safety with Adams, or are you still looking at other safeties to bring in?
I mean, we're looking at other people at all positions. We were just talking, about bringing some guys in just to kick some tires and, see where guys are. Our roster isn't set. Obviously, we don't have to have the roster set till September. So we're always looking to improve at every position. Okay.
Now, I'm going to play another cut to answer another question to contrast with that. Again, I asked, are you done at safety, or are you still, we're always interested in every position, which is what you always hear, the coach talk. But then he was asked about DeAndre Hopkins and DeAndre's contract, which was another one of our questions. And here was his answer on DeAndre, and then we'll compare the two.
If you start the year, any thought on DeAndre Hopkins and extending him? Like, have you talked to Kelton and those guys about that at all?
We've identified a number of guys that, we'd like to continue to move forward with, and eventually take care. But you guys have heard me, we're going to keep family business in terms of talking about their contracts and what's next for them. But we as a staff, we have identified some guys that, we'd like to have here, long term.
Is DeAndre one of them?
He's one of the guys that's on our team. And and we've talked about a number of guys on the team to have those conversations. One thing I appreciate about D-Hop is if you guys have gotten to know him, D-Hop is straightforward. And, and D-Hop and I, we can have some straightforward conversations, and we have and we do. And so D-Hop knows how we feel about him, and I think that's a big thing, especially for a veteran, at this stage in his career. And I think the way he's shown up here, the way he's bought into a new staff kind of shows how he feels about us and what we have going.
They're going to re-sign DeAndre Hopkins, or at least they're going to try. So again, the two answers: are you done at safety after you added Jamal Adams, or are you still looking? Oh, we're looking to add at every position. DeAndre is, we're going to keep family business inside the family, but there are some guys that we've circled that what about DeAndre? Well, DeAndre is a guy, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that we've circled, and God bless DeAndre, and God bless these United States of America. You see the difference? So Jamal Adams is starting at safety, and they are done at safety. Not sure exactly how I feel about that, but I am in favor of re-signing DeAndre. And then finally, the organizational structure. Anthony Robinson was sitting up there with Rand Carthon, which is fine, but normally the NFL makes you put the number 1 and number 2 up there. When John Robinson was GM and Ryan Cowden was there, it was like, okay, Cowden's number 2 over Monty Ossenfort. Then when they fired Robinson, it was Cowden that was made the interim GM because he was number 2. So Carthon's up there, and so is Anthony Robinson. What about Chad Brinker? We got the vice president. We have the assistant GM, but we don't have the president of football operations. And I heard Joe today compare Chad Brinker to Steve Underwood. Truly one of the stupidest things I've ever heard come out of that man's mouth. I mean, Steve Underwood was a lawyer. Chad Brinker was scouting at the Senior Bowl. Like, those are not comparable. But anywho, what about this organizational structure? Who's making these decisions? Rand asked about it. Here's what he said today.
About final say earlier in the year. Can you just kind of talk us through what the process will be next month with you and Ryan when it comes time to?
Yeah, so it's I've gotten off the word. I know it's the buzzword, but it's going to be a collaborative thing, and it's not going to be one of those pissing matches, if you will. Everybody that we have brought here, we brought here together. And there are going to be some decisions, whether this month, next month, a year from now, where, we're not going to be on the same page, but then that's where it becomes a collective. We have, it's not just Brian and myself. We have other people that are involved in the process who, have a vested interest in it. And so we're going to have all of us involved, but I know ultimately it comes down to Brian and I. And so whatever decision that's made is going to be made in the best interest of the team and not a power thing between Brian and I.
It's going to be a committee that decides these decisions. They're all going to get a say. And maybe that works. I don't know. But that's what's going to happen. And I will give Rand credit because in football, a lot of these guys, I mean, I remember Shane Bowen when Jim Schwartz showed up and Mike Vrabel was like, everyone's like, so who's in charge of the defense, Vrabel? I'm in charge of everything. And then Shane Bowen get up there, I'm the one running the defense. And it was like, so everybody's saying they're in charge. What's that? Rand sitting there saying, hey, I don't want to keep saying collaboration, but it's going to be a group decision. And if it's going to be a group decision, Chad Brinker should have been up there because he's part of the group. But they answered the questions right then and there. They're done at safety. Sweat, we can judge him tomorrow. We can judge Tavondre Sweat tomorrow. Nicholas Petit-Frere, hurt again. And this time it's a different injury. Good God. And they want to re-sign DeAndre. And I think that, again, we can debate each one or talk about each one, but to me, the questions I have about where this team, that need to be answered, they got answered today. 615-737-1025. A lot of you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025. A lot of people are mad that yesterday on the official Stillman and Company expectation show, I put my expectations based upon the model at 5-11, or excuse me, 5-12. 5-11 is the old 16-game schedule. 5-12. By the way, I got crushed on Robbie and Rex Road about this morning. Ian had him at 4-13.
I heard Robbie call me out at least once.
Did he?
Yeah.
Good for him. I mean, don't get mad at the model just because it says what you don't like. We'll get to that. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 to the game.
Callahan just talked about how excited he is just to start training camp. You guys have put in a lot of work over the last several months. What's the excitement level for you going?
Same. Ready to get it kicked off and get rolling, get back to what this whole thing is about. It's just football and seeing the guys on the field. And like you said, made a lot of changes on the team and a lot of new guys. And this will be the first time all those guys have been together. So excited to see that.
That was Rand Carthon earlier today. I am excited to get to your phones here on Training Camp, 615-737-1025. As promised, our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I know it's early for this question, Ian, but do you have a thought or do you want to go to the phones?
Oh, to the phones is good.
Phones. Jeremy has been waiting patiently and is going to kick us off this football season since training camp starts today. Jeremy, go ahead.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. First of all, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Let me preface what I was going to say by stating I'm an OTR truck driver, and I was not in Nashville yesterday to hear your take on what the upcoming season would be. My view, my expectation and hopes are pretty similar to yours. My expectation with a new head coach, a new offense, a quarterback that's getting his first time to be a full-time starter, I'm expecting the team to come out of the gate slow, but by the end of the season, be better than they were at the beginning of the season. My hope is as the season goes on and the team gets better, 6 wins, maybe 7, and I would consider it a successful season.
So I wouldn't sit here and tell you, thank you, Jeremy. I would not sit here and tell you that 6 wins would be successful. There's a difference between expectation and hope, and I know he kind of brought those two up, but I'm not hoping for a 5-win season or a 6-win season. I'm hoping that you're this year's version of the Texans, that you're last year's version of 2 years ago's version of Jacksonville. Like, that's what I'm hoping, where it's like, man, Titans sucked, and then all of a sudden they brought this guy. Remember when Sean McVay got to the Rams? Jared Goff had spent half a year flailing under Jeff Fisher, and they kind of canned the whole staff, and nobody's thinking about the Rams, and McVay and Wade Phillips show up, and all of a sudden the Rams are a juggernaut, and Goff's a Pro Bowler. I mean, if Brian Callahan's got that secret sauce inside of him, and with Big Callahan coaching the offensive line, maybe there's a chance. I'll tell you, I'll take that. That's kind of the hope. The Lord, please be with the Titans. Amen. But expectation and hope are different. I mean, think about what your hope is for a grade and what your expectation is for a grade. I hope to get it. I mean, I hope I get an A. My expectation, I'll probably end up getting a C. That's, again, the difference for me. And I got to say that I'm going to take Kyle's call because I think that where his call's going is kind of what again, is a point I want to hammer about the expectation model, the official Stillman and Company expectation model. Oh, by the way, I'd like to state for the record right now, Kyle's on hold and Adam in Portland are on hold. And this morning.
Yes, I heard this.
You heard this morning too?
I did, yeah.
Okay, this morning there was a question as to whether or not they were the same person. I am telling you right now, they are both on hold. Kyle, go ahead.
All right, man. I couldn't believe myself when I heard y'all say 4 wins, 5 wins. Our division is not that strong. Of course, Houston's going to take over, but Jacksonville, we don't believe in Trevor Lawrence. We don't believe in AK over there up at Indianapolis. We're going to win some games. Our offense is too good. I agree. Our defense has plenty of holes in it, and I believe Rand's going to fix them. But
let me ask you this question, Kyle. Do you think the Titans should beat Jacksonville?
I think they should split.
So you think that they should split?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think they should beat Indianapolis?
I wouldn't be surprised they swept them. I do not believe in Anthony Richardson. I know you do. You like his talent, but I think he's going to get hurt. I think he's going to struggle, and there's going to be some drama up there.
So what you're saying is you think that the Colts, those 2 games, should both be in the should-win category?
I do. I don't believe in I don't believe in how they built their roster. They just reloaded, signed a bunch of players that have had torn ACLs, and I don't like how they built their team. I really don't. But besides that, the vision, we're a better team.
Do you think they should beat Cincinnati? Do you think they should beat Cincinnati?
Okay, a lot of this is up in the air because.
Do you think they should go on the road and beat the Chargers?
Yes, I do. I do not believe in the Chargers. I
With
think they've
Justin Herbert, they've got a franchise quarterback. You do not. Levis might become a franchise. He's not a franchise quarterback. So you think they should go on the road, fly across the country, and they should beat the Chargers?
Yes, I really do, because they don't have any receivers. I think our defensive backs are going to lock them down. Big Jeff's going to do his thing, and then we're going to be steady on offense.
Okay.
I really, and you know me,
you
I believe in Will. I believe in Will.
Should they beat the Jets, who had the third-ranked defense in the NFL last year and won more games than you with Zach Wilson at quarterback?
For some reason, we lose to the Jets all the time. They suck, and we lose to them. So, yeah, I'll say we may lose to them just because we always drop a game, something like that.
So here's the point. Hey, Kyle, thank you for the call. Here's the point about how the expectations are formed. This is not, again, I'm not looking at the team saying that's a 5-win team. That's not how we do this. How we do it is we separate the categories between the games they should win. The game, like, again, they're playing the Patriots, which right now looks like a JV team. They'll win that game. They'll win it. They should beat Washington on the road. They should, in my opinion, beat Minnesota at home. But other than that, I can't go where Kyle goes, where he's saying they should beat Justin Herbert on the road. I can't do that. I can't say they should beat Indianapolis, which is why both Indianapolis games are toss-ups. You lost to Indy twice last year. Now, again, it's a different season, but I can't say you should beat Indy. I can't say you should beat Aaron Rodgers. I can't say you should beat Chicago, who is better than you and upgraded significantly, most likely, at quarterback. I can't say you should beat Cincinnati. I can't say you should beat Jacksonville. I can't do that. And the way you do it is you take the games that you should win and will win, and you split the toss-ups, and that's the wins. And you take the ones that you will lose, like you're not going to beat Houston on the road. You're not going to beat Detroit with all their great players. You're not going to beat Buffalo in Buffalo. You're not going to do that. And you take those. Green Bay and Miami were playoff teams last year. You won 6 games. That doesn't mean that you can't win those games. That's the one thing that I think people don't understand. I'm not saying you can't win those games. I'm just saying where we sit today, you should not expect the Titans to win those games because nobody expects the Titans to win those games. You're sitting there saying, well, I don't think Indianapolis, they took some risks on some guys with some torn ACLs and they have a right tackle. Like they have a team that almost made the playoffs last year and they're bringing their starting quarterback back. So come on now. Again, I don't live in this world of, well, they could do this, so now let's just assume that it's going to have 9 wins. That's not what I'm saying. If they win 9 games, and this is why the word expectation is so important. If they win 9 games this year, when we expect them to win 5, that will be like Mike Mularkey's first season where that team went 9-7, and nobody thought going into the year that was a team in December we'd be talking about the playoffs. The Titans have been lousy for 10 years before that. I remember when Ryan Succop was kicking that ball against Kansas City in December of 2016, and I'm watching the game upstairs in my parents' house with my dad, and Succop's kicking for the win to kick you back into the playoff race, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, I've missed this. I've missed the anxiety that comes with a team that is worth watching. Well, right now, you're going back to the basics. Back to your phones. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in on this. We're going right to your phones. Adam in Portland, again, he is clearly not Kyle from Shelbyville, as we have discovered. 615-737-1025 and your phone. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 for the game.
Brian just talked about how he's excited about launching the competition at the two spots on the right side of the offensive line. When you have those position battles in camp, how involved are you guys in that? Like, did you shop for the groceries and now it's all up on them, or are you involved in the conversations of who you think should be there? I've been joking with Callie these last couple of days, and telling him that it's his time now. But in all fairness, I think it's going to be good. We're going to be involved. We just met with the offensive staff yesterday, going through how we're going to chart practice, how we're going to grade practice, and how our staff can be a part of that in terms of inputting the data and us being all on the same page and how we're talking about these guys and seeing these guys. And so it's going to be an evolving process, for us. And I'll speak for me and A-Rob when I say we're not coaching anybody. We're not implementing any scheme. I'm not going to go and tell Jerron Christian, he needs to fit his hands better, or have better hat placement on outside zone. However, we know what the traits are, what we're looking for, and what's going to need to, make our system go. And so we'll be, involved on a daily basis of how we're evaluating and seeing these guys so we can pick, not only the best five to go out there, week one, but also those top backups, because as we know, guys get banged up all the time, and we need to not miss a step when we put backups in.
That was Rand Carthon talking about the right side of the line today. Brian Callahan says it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a real camp battle. Don't go out there tomorrow, see somebody playing right tackle, and just think that's going to be the right tackle, because it might be somebody else the next day. And here's kind of the depth chart in my head. At right tackle, Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a.
PT.
Jalen Duncan, 2. Jerron Christian, 3. And John Ojukwu, a.k.a.
OJ.
OJ is 4th. Right guard, Sadiq Charles, number 1. Dylan Radins, number 2. Daniel Brunskill, number 3. That's how I see it. And I don't think Brian Callahan's lying when he says it's going to be a battle. And I would be scared to death if anybody else was coaching them and this was the group of guys I had on the right side of the line. But Ryan Harris did say the problem with the offensive lines in the NFL is not the practice time, it is the coaching. And he played it, and I do think there are a lot of bad O-line coaches in the league. Adam in Portland is up next here on the program. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Adam.
Jared, I missed that show. Was it a host or one of your guys? Who was saying that they thought I was Kyle?
Robbie.
I've known him forever. I'm never calling him again, dude. That makes me so mad.
Well, in fairness, Robbie had been texted by multiple people, and that was what he relayed. But enough of that. Get to your point.
Okay. Yeah, so I want to challenge you to do something. So I know you keep saying we don't have a right tackle. We got a bunch of right tackles. And if you think that this offensive line coach could be good, I would just want to challenge, give it like 2 months. Then you could keep saying that, because it hurts my ears when you say that. So can you just, if the coach is good, then we should have like major improvement. It doesn't matter who's playing the position, right? Like, can you at least do that? Can you at least give it through camp and see if this coach can coach up these sorry right tackles?
So I like the fact that you argued that we had right tackles, and then at the end said these were sorry right tackles we have, and I at least appreciate that, Adam. Thank you. Here's what I will say. So again, I referenced the Ryan Harris cut. In fact, Ian, if you could grab that for me from yesterday. Ryan Harris played on the offensive line, played at Notre Dame, and then played in the NFL for a while with Denver. And now he does the Broncos preseason games on TV, and he calls the Notre Dame games on the radio with Paul Burmeister, who calls the Titan games on TV, the preseason games. He does the Notre Dame games with Paul Burmeister. And he also works at Sirius with me. And I had Ryan Harris on a Sirius show, and I asked him, we were talking about how bad the New York Giants line is, because that was kind of a theme in Hard Knocks when they spent all that money on John Runyon Jr. and they went out and got Jermaine Illuminor, and they were interested in Robert Hunt. And we were talking about that. I said, is the problem that they don't practice enough? With no padded practices, no two-a-days, no this, no that. And Ryan Harris said, no, it was the coaching, and that there are too many bad offensive line coaches. Here's what he said.
9 teams that had an offensive line coach that actually played the position, and of them 7 had actually played in the NFL. So this is a position that is historically woefully undercoached, with people who don't understand what they're talking about. They can get other players in bad positions. So that's why you see Kansas City consistently go to the Super Bowl. Yes, they have Patrick Mahomes and they have Andy Heck, one of the best offensive line history of the NFL, who teaches technique that you remember when you're dog tired and when you're at your first snap of the game. So as always with offensive line, it will depend on the coaching and the techniques that the offensive line coach is drilling into players and whether that offensive line coach actually knows what he's talking about.
Okay. I think we can all agree Bill Callahan knows exactly what he's talking about. So when I heard that, again, that was a conversation that had nothing to do with the Titans. But I heard that and I was like, okay, that gives me some faith. That gives me some faith that Bill Callahan can make chicken salad out of this offensive line. So to answer your question, Adam, yes, I'm going to give it a shot. But at the same time, I mean, I still think we don't have a right tackle. I still think that applies. I was actually talking to my dad about that over the weekend, and I was talking about how people push back now on that. And I heard Joe last week on Robbie and Rex Road said, how is the right tackle story applicable now? With PT, Duncan, Christian, and OJ? You're asking me how the we don't have a right tackle story is applicable now? The question is, how is it not applicable? But anywho, I was talking to my dad about it, and I said, I know a lot of people are sick of hearing that story. I know a lot of people think that I've made too much of that story. I know, but I said to him, I go, you know exactly what Floyd meant when he told that story, and I relayed that story to everybody else. When he said that, you know exactly what I meant, talking to my dad. And you know as well as I do that everybody that brushes it off, one guy texted into the text line and was like, that's not what Floyd meant, as if he heard what the GM said. I was the only person that heard it. And I know exactly what he meant when he said it. And I think it exactly applies to this offensive line right now. And I said to my dad, I go, so you know when people try to brush that off, they're just talking to themselves. They're just trying to convince themselves to make them feel better that, oh, no, Jared doesn't always know. I know exactly what he said. I know exactly what he meant. And I know that it's exactly true today. And so does my dad and everybody else who has common sense. Brandon is up next on the program. Thank you for calling and waiting. Brandon, go ahead. Let's go, Brandon. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared. Thanks for taking my call. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, man. I think one thing you kind of touched on is, how difficult our schedule really is this season. And I don't think a lot of previous callers really can understand the difficulty our defense is really going to take this season. And there's just too many unknowns. Just like you just said, the right tackle, we don't really know. Defense, first-year defensive coordinator, we don't really know. Will Levis is also an unknown. And so I think we really need to tether our expectations to that. I mean, if we get more than 4 wins this season, that's great. 4 to 8 wins, fantastic. If we make a playoff berth, that's truly hopeful. But I think a lot of people just really need to tether our expectations and understand what we're really up against in this 2024 season. I'll hang up and listen, and thanks for taking my call.
Brandon, good call. Here's the thing that I struggle with when it comes to the schedule, because everybody keeps saying, well, Jared, we won 6 games last year and we're much better this year than we were last year, which again, I'm not totally convinced is true. I mean, if I had to bet my house right now on a quarterback to win me a game today between Will Levis or Ryan Tannehill, I think I'd rather have Ryan Tannehill play quarterback. He's not here. Now, if I had to bet who's more likely to become Dan Marino in the future, I'd put it all on Levis, because Tannehill, we know what his ceiling is. But again, right now, win 1 game, Tannehill's my guy. So you don't have him anymore. Derrick Henry was the best player on the team. He's not here anymore. Danico Autry recorded 11.5 sacks last year. He's not here anymore. So, yeah, look, L'Jarius Sneed's a very good player. And these other guys are solid too. But I mean, you're still, I'm not exactly sure you're that much better, even though you spent a gajillion dollars. The reason you spent all that money and you're still 16th in payroll. You want to know why? Because all the good players you had left, all the guys that made money outside of Simmons aren't here anymore over the last 2 years. AJ's not here anymore. Tannehill's not here anymore. Henry's not here anymore. None of the guys you paid, none of them are here anymore. That's why. But again, the other thing people don't account for is the schedule. You just happen to get a 4th place schedule the year that Joe Burrow gets hurt. So now you draw into Cincinnati, who is a Super Bowl contender. Normally, when you get a fourth place schedule, you're playing Scarbinis. You're not playing Joe Burrow, who until he hurt his wrist was back-to-back AFC Championship game appearances. I mean, it sucks for you, but it's reality. You draw into the Chargers, a team that's always had talent, has a legitimate franchise quarterback, and changed out the stupidest coach in the NFL for a Super Bowl coach, one who has been to the Super Bowl. Now, look, 6 years from now, Harbaugh will have pissed everybody off, but we're not 6 years in. So the two teams you get because of the fourth place schedule are those two. Now, you also get Washington, which I do think is a boon. And that's why they're one of the should wins. But to me, there are two bad teams on this schedule. Two legitimately bad teams. New England, Washington. That's it. That's it. Everybody else, the Jets were bad last year, but Zach Wilson's not quarterbacking them. Aaron Rodgers, an all-time great, is quarterbacking them. So I don't look at the Jets and think, man, I'll tell you, this team ought to beat the Jets with Will Levis at quarterback. Sure, they went on the road to Miami last year and won. That was a total luck of the draw, and everybody knows. So I just think it's going to be more difficult. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. That's 615-737-1025 here on the program. If anybody else wants to get in, we will get to your phones. And coming up next, there is one thing that I will relay to you at training camp, but it does not mean it is the end of the world. We'll get to that next here on Stillman & Company. First, I'm going to tell you about Window Nation. If your home is burning up and you have got to crank the AC all the way up because you've got old single-pane windows and that sun is hitting them, you need to give my friends at Window Nation a call. There are tons of window companies. A lot of people would love to replace your windows. But Window Nation is the company that I trust because I had Window Nation out to my home, and they didn't try to sell me on anything. In fact, they told me after they showed me all their different window models, they said, no, you don't need to replace your windows. And that makes me feel good about them. And I so love telling you about it. Plus, I love telling you about the fact that they're ranked highest on Forbes' list of best window installation companies. And that right now, for every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 windows free. Plus 0 down and no interest or payments for 2 years. So stop paying more than you have to. Again, for every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 free. 0 down, no interest or payments for 2 years. Call 866-90Nation or visit windownation.com. That's Window Nation, 866-90Nation, windownation.com. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. The first practice is tomorrow. That means we will have Turbo Set Hut tomorrow, which I am so excited about. We'll be seeing passes thrown in the air. We'll be seeing guys, do the little ladder drills that all the local scribes take videos of and then post them, and you guys love it. We will have all of that tomorrow. Oh, I'm so excited. But one thing that I am going to tell you right now is going to happen is that Will Levis is going to make mistakes. Will Levis is going to throw interceptions in training camp. Will Levis is going to miss receivers in training camp. Will Levis is going to have some regrettable stat lines. At the end of a day where in 7-on-7 and team periods, Will Levis was 4 of 13 with 2 interceptions. It will happen. It's okay. He might even, like he did in OTAs, he might even throw a ball in the lake. It'll be okay. Because the Titans with Will Levis are not where they've been over the last 7 or so years. When Mike Mularkey took the job in 2016, and they were coming off of a 3-13 season, and they weren't very good, and nobody had any expectation for them. New GM, new coach. Mariota was a quarterback, but Marcus Mariota was the number 2 pick in the draft. Will Levis was the number 2 pick in the second round. Not the same. So the expectations for Marcus going into 2016 should have been higher off the bat than they should be for Levis. For Levis right now, these are baby steps, man. Then after that, you almost made it to the playoffs. So now you're talking playoffs in 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And last year, Tannehill was the quarterback. And the expectations were this team could make it to the playoffs. We're not there this year. You're starting from scratch. You're starting all over. And it takes time. Offenses take time in order to gel. And that's if you've got a veteran quarterback, it's going to take a little bit of time. So when I go out to the practice field, I'm going to be looking for growth when it comes to Will Levis. And I asked Brian Callahan today because, again, I think bad things are going to happen. I think there's going to be interceptions. I think there's going to be tip passes. I think there's going to be plays that are blown dead because of sacks. I think there's going to be a lot of things people aren't going to want to hear because everybody wants to believe that Levis is going to be a franchise quarterback. But just because he makes mistakes in practice does not mean that he can't eventually become a franchise quarterback. If I was worried about winning week 1 and Levis being great week 1, then I probably would be very concerned about mistakes happening in practice, like I was for Tannehill when he was coming off of a year that wasn't very good and they were the number 1 seed in the AFC. This team is not that. So I asked Brian Callahan, knowing that these stat lines are probably going to be bad in practice, knowing there's going to be some moments like when he threw the ball into the lake, which again, I've never seen happen before. I don't give a rat's ass how it got there. He threw a ball into the Cumberland River. I've never seen that before. And I don't care if it bounced in there or not. Boy, it was exciting though when it happened. Anywho, with all of that going on, I asked Brian Callahan, I said, how do you tolerate the mistakes given that everybody wants to be good all the time? Here's what he said.
Between, putting in an offense and bringing along a young quarterback, and yet at the same time knowing that those same mistakes, if they happen in a game, could be incredibly costly. How do you manage that in training?
Yeah, that's a good question. The ability to test in practice for a quarterback, a throw, a tight window throw, maybe he wouldn't make in a game. You have to put a little bit of faith and trust in the quarterback that they're going to try some things in practice and it's encouraged to, with the understanding that maybe if that was a game, you might not make that throw. Now the trust comes in is that if it really is a game, would you still make that throw? We don't know that, until you actually get out there and play. But I think Will's got a pretty good grasp and Mason and Malik as well about, when it's appropriate to be more risky and more aggressive than maybe you might be in a normal game on a 1st and 10 than you are in a 7-on-7 period in practice. And so there is an experimentation that they're allowed. There's some freedom there, but we always coach it afterwards. Like that's good. I'm glad you decided to try that. Just understand that if this was 1st and 10 in the first quarter of the first game, we're probably going to check this ball down. And they work through. That's on them to work through. But we coach that part of it when they're in those positions.
And so it's going to happen, but we're not going to see the coaching part of it. We're not going to see when they sit down in the film room after practice and Brian Callahan sitting there saying, okay, why did you throw that ball into triple coverage to Treylon Burks that would have gotten him killed? And Levis is like, well, I thought I could squeeze it in there. And I thought, okay, well, we don't want that. And it's going to be a process. Like, I wouldn't surprise me if Levis stinks the first week of camp and then gets better throughout. It wouldn't surprise me if Levis stinks at the beginning of the season and gets better throughout. Jordan Love right now for the Green Bay Packers is holding in until he gets his $55 million a year contract. And they say he's going to sign a massive contract. I mean, I don't know if I'd give it to him, but again, it is what it is. So, I mean, he's going to get this huge contract. And midway through last year, their general manager, Brian Gutekunst, came out and said, yeah, these are Big 10 games to see whether or not Jordan Love's the guy. And Jordan Love was a 4th-year quarterback last year. So these things are going to take time. And it's okay. It's okay. I'm not going to come in. Levis throws 4 picks tomorrow. I'm not going to go back. Levis sucks. I'm not going to do that. It reminds me of the 2022 training camp when Malik had a lot of hype around him. And I watched Malik, and I'm like, this guy sucks right now. And I said it. I said, Malik Willis sucks right now. And boy, did people get mad at me. That's not fair, Jared. He's a rookie. Right. And he's on a team that was the #1 seed in the AFC playoffs last year, and we're talking Super Bowl. So he is a broken pinky away from being put into the middle of a playoff run. And it happened. Tannehill got hurt. In goes Malik at Kansas City on Sunday Night Football. And I knew he wasn't ready for that. Well, if I knew that you were a 5-win team, or that was my expectation for you, was that you were a 5-win team, and then I'd say, okay, we can work through the kinks with Malik. But when I said Malik stunk in 2022, I'm like, they need to get a real backup quarterback in here because Malik needs to be redshirted. Last year with Levis, I said, are you sure you want to put him out there behind that line? You might ruin him the way the Texans ruined David Carr. It's going to take time. So I'm not going to get too wrapped up in the training camp mistakes. They will happen. The question is, can Brian Callahan coach Will Levis up after he makes those mistakes? And will Levis learn from those mistakes going forward? I don't assume that guys will learn from their mistakes going forward. I hope they will learn from their mistakes going forward. And I go back to that throw that Levis made against the Texans, the interception where he threw into double coverage for Hopkins, where he rolled out and there were 2 Texan defenders, and there was Hopkins and there was Burks, and Burks went running down the field, and both Texans defenders went with Hopkins, and he tried to fit that ball into Hopkins, and it got intercepted, whereas if he had just slowed down and threw the ball down the field, he probably would have had a touchdown to Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks would have caught it. Well, now, the next time that happens, will he take that second and fire that ball to Burks? No, hey, I got time. Let's see what's going on. Okay, now I can throw it down the field. But that's what practice is for. If for the Super Bowl, if they were the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen went out there and threw 8 picks in practice, I'd be upset about it. But he's not Josh Allen yet. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. If you want to weigh in here on the program at 615-737-1025. Somebody says, by the way, it's not the Cumberland River. It was the facility lake. It was tipped and bounced. You're right, mistakes happen, but stop dramatizing a pass that should have been caught. It wasn't even his fault. I don't know how this texter saw it, but I didn't see it. 615-737-1025 here on our program on Training Camp. It's Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063. The Game. Let's talk Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love my friends at Hiller. They are the best, and they are celebrating 34 years in the business this year. They're bringing the celebration to you with their birthday bash this month. From now until July 31st, enjoy a free smart thermostat with select new HVAC systems, a free water test, $300 off a new tankless water heater, and buy 10, get 2 free landscape lights. Celebrate Hiller's birthday bash by visiting happyhiller.com today for details. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today.
With Levis taking over and actually being a starter, et cetera, how do you feel he's done as far as stepping forward, whether it's the trip to Cabo, putting the other passing camps and things together?
No, I think he was great. Just he's growing as a leader, finding his voice, being empowered, just in terms of what the coaches allow him to do and what he's been asked to do. My only drawback from this offseason with him was that I didn't get invited to Cabo. So that was my only beef with Will and what he's done this offseason.
By the way, I heard Joe say today, and I don't know if it came out in The Athletic or not. Joe said he had a piece coming on Levis yesterday. I don't know if he said that on the air when he was rudely interrupting our program yesterday. But Joe came into the studio and he had lost his power cord, and he said he was doing a story on Levis, and I probably should have checked to see if that dropped. Do you know if that dropped?
It did, yeah.
Okay, did you read it?
Not all of it, no.
Okay, so apparently Joe said this morning that Levis actually spent a lot of his own money on that Cabo trip, and I got to say, if that's the case, I'm a little disappointed in DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley, because they should have been the ones to pay for that, not Levis, because they should have let Levis offer to pay and then say, no, young fellow, we got you taken care of. That's all I'll say about that. But they do seem to be very excited about his leadership and how much he loves football and all that stuff. That's great. Just because you love football, just because you want to be great at football, does not mean that you will be great at football. There are a lot of guys that check every box of the quarterback book, except they're not very good at quarterback. In fact, the last quarterback around here that wore number 8 checked a lot of boxes, except unfortunately at times he wasn't very good and he couldn't stay healthy. One texter into the text line says, Herb from McEwen says, how mad are you going to be when the Titans draft another quarterback next year? We will cross that bridge when we get to it. Craig says, do you think that Coach Callahan, who has never run an offense to my understanding before, already has his offensive playbook completed for his players to learn? So that is a little bit more complicated than, yes, here's the playbook, now run the plays. Because for the most part, the big playbook, yeah, that's done. That's it in. They've got it. The players have run through it in the offseason. They've gone over it in the meetings. They've all got it on their iPads, things like that. What happens in the NFL, though, is that every week they run different plays based on the team that they are playing. It's not like Madden football, where it's like, okay, we got 200 plays. Let's ask Madden. And then Madden says, sometimes you got to set up the run. You got to set up the run by using the pass. But other times you got to pass by using the run. That's not real life. So what they're going to ask Will Levis to run and the receivers to do against the Chicago Bears, that's not in yet. But the big picture stuff of kind of the base of the offense, that's in there. And there is a difference between the two. One texter says, what a buzzkill. I was excited about training camp an hour ago. At least this year, there are question marks for opposing defenses instead of stopping one guy. If we are only going to win 5 games, are we going to have to root for Henry? LOL. So let me say this about the whole stopping one guy thing. Because a lot of Titan fans, I'm starting to see this narrative that the Titans are going to throw the ball more. Yay! This is going to be a high-powered offense. Yay! We are going away from the Mike Vrabel 1945 football. Yay! Did you guys not enjoy when Arthur Smith was the coordinator? Do you guys remember the 2020 season when the Titans had the second-ranked offense in the NFL? And the Titans went out there and lit up the freaking scoreboard every week, and they had to because the defense sucked. Because I do remember that. And so I know you guys told me that everything in the past with Derrick Henry, and that was all 1935 football, leather helmets and games not on TV and the old radio where it was AM and you'd hear the guy call the third ball for the 44 and he goes to drops back. No. Like, that's what you guys talk about, Mike, for saying, oh, that's what that used to be. And now this is going to be like the NASA offense. But you guys seem to forget what 2019 and 2020 were like when you lit up the scoreboard. So to me, I don't think it's a good thing that Derrick Henry's not on this team anymore. And I don't totally understand it. And I understand everybody likes new, and the Titans were bad last year, and Derrick's 30 years old, but I don't think you're better without Derrick Henry. And I've seen some of that bull crap on Twitter about people don't understand Tajay Spears is actually better than Derrick Henry. I'm like, guys, you got to put that good crack down, because that is, nobody on the planet would tell you that that's the case.
I'm a little bit confused about the running back as far as situation.
So was a doctor that looked at a bug bite that I got in the Bahamas on my leg.
who the starter is. I know Callahan said today he doesn't really, it doesn't really bother him, or he doesn't really care who technically is the starter. But you've paid a lot of money for Pollard, and you spent a 3rd-round pick on Spears. So are you getting maximum value and usage out of that money as far as how you're going to be using them and the assets that you've put forward in that position?
So I would argue, to your point, Jermaine Illuminor went to the Giants with, I think, $7 million a year. Pollard's $8 million. What would you rather have? Would you rather have, I'm talking to you, Ian, what would you rather have? Would you rather have Tajay Spears at running back and go get, the last guy standing, like Zach Moss or whoever it was of all the running backs that were out there? Once Saquon's off the board, once Pollard's off the board, once Gus Edwards. Go get Gus Edwards. So you've got Spears and Gus Edwards and Illuminor at right tackle, or Spears and Pollard and wing it at right tackle.
Yeah, I think I'd probably rather have the right tackle.
And so that is one of the things that I'm not sure I completely understand is, did you really need to pay $8 million for Tony Pollard?
If he's not going to play that much and we love Spears so much.
I mean, and if you're going to use a 3rd-round pick on Spears, Spears needs to be an every down back because it's running back where you can go get a guy in the 6th round. Like Breece Hall is a 2nd-round pick, and he might be one of the best running backs in the NFL right now. Like, that's what you're supposed to get. So I agree with you. I think that at the time, we didn't know when the Titans were going to stop spending money. So when they signed Tony Pollard for $8 million, it was like, okay, now let's see what the other moves are. But now that I look at the team and I don't see a right tackle, but I see an $8 million maybe backup running back, it does concern me. I definitely do. I mean, I definitely am a little iffy. I got a bug bite and I had to get it looked at. And the doctor and I were talking, and the doctor was like, I don't understand the Tony Pollard move. And I was like, well, doc, I understand it. I think Pollard is going to be the running back, and I think Spears is going to be the receiving back. The problem with that is that I don't need a 3rd-round pick on a 3rd down back.
And Pollard's been the starting running back for Dallas, and they didn't like it. They pulled the plug.
Well, didn't he get?
He got hurt, but they had and they franchise tagged him, and he had a chance. But they let him go, and they're bringing back Zeke.
Well, in fairness to Pollard, Dallas has spent $0 this year, so I think that may be more about Dallas
than it is
about Pollard.
I suppose that's fair.
Dallas is a total gong show. Stephen Jones is going on the radio talking about, the reason we couldn't sign Derrick Henry was because of the cap. And I'm like, really? The Eagles didn't have a hard time signing Saquon Barkley, and they're paying 2 receivers. You're not even paying 1 receiver. You're supposed to eventually pay the 1 receiver you have, but you're not even paying him. Philly's paying 2 receivers, a tight end, an entire offensive line, $50 million at quarterback, and they've got a defense, and they are able to pay Saquon Barkley. But Dallas can't sign anybody. And Jerry hasn't re-signed any of those 3 between Dak, CD, and Micah. And I think it's because Jerry is more worried about winning the business of football, where they have the 32nd payroll in the league, and they're spending $126 million less. $126 million. $126 million less than the Philadelphia Eagles on their roster. But I digress. 615-737-1025. Speaking of Derrick Henry, there was a rumor last week that the Titans were going to accept a 4th-round pick in exchange for Derrick Henry that conditionally could have been a 3rd, but, it started at a 4th. A 4th-round pick for Henry, and Amy Adams Strunk shut it down. Rand Carthon was asked about that today, what he had to say. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Did you think you were going to? Because you were obviously in a lot of speculation. I'll say I don't know how many conversations were taking place.
Well, I feel like it was close. It was close. I feel like it was, yeah.
You know something?
It was close. It was close, boys. It was close.
To who?
It was
in the playoffs.
Yeah. It was. I know 2 for sure. It was. I mean, I don't know the other one. I don't know if that would have happened, but one of them, I felt like it was pretty close.
What makes you
a lot went down between that little saga with the trade and all that stuff.
Okay, that was Derrick Henry after the season in January on Bussin' with the Boys, the day that Mike Vrabel got fired, saying, boys, it was close. I mean, I'm just telling you right now, it was close. It almost went down. And then last week, it came out in The Athletic that the Titans were offered a 4th-round pick, which could have become a 3rd-rounder, a conditional 3rd, so it would have started at 4th, in order to send Derrick Henry to the Ravens. And it was reported that Titans ownership is the one that said no, that the Titans football people said yes, and ownership said no. And Kaharski said on the morning show, and I have no reason to doubt that Kaharski's not getting this information directly from Mike Vrabel, because that's what Paul does. He gets info directly from Mike Vrabel and then reports it as fact. And he said that Vrabel was willing to sell off anything for future assets. So it's like, oh, hey, we've got this guy. We'll take a 7th. That was kind of the vibe I got from how Paul described it, which makes me think that Paul talked to Vrabel about it. So, that being said, this is what it said in The Athletic. Quote, DaCosta, talking about Eric DaCosta, the general manager of the Ravens, agreed to the framework of a trade with Tennessee general manager Ran Carthon, a 4th-round pick that could have become a 3rd had Henry reached certain production levels. However, others in the Titans hierarchy were apparently not on board with the deal, so Henry played out the season in Nashville. Kaharski, at the end of the press conference today, asked Rand specifically about that report.
Were you offered a 4th that could have turned into a 3rd for Derrick last year?
No, I wasn't. I don't know where that came from. That's not my concern. But we had multiple teams, to call about Derrick and offer something that wasn't worth taking or worth even considering. And I communicated that with Derrick during that time. But no, we never agreed with anybody to do anything to move anybody.
Okay. Somebody's not telling the truth. And I don't know who it is. And I'm not going to say that it is Rand who's not telling the truth. I know a lot of you think I'm going to say that. I know a lot of you out there want me to say it. I'm not saying it because I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about the Ravens and Derrick Henry and the trade, and I don't know anything about that. But somebody's lying. Either The Athletic is lying, Dan Pompei, who wrote this story, who I think has a pretty good reputation, or Rand. Again, this is what it says in The Athletic. Quote, DaCosta agreed to the framework of a trade with Tennessee general manager Ran Carthon. So there is no ambiguity here, right? I mean, it's not even like sources say that the two teams and then it's DaCosta agreed to the framework of a deal. In fact, it sounds, Ian, if I'm reading this correctly, so the paragraph before is a quote from Eric DaCosta about Derrick Henry. Quote, he decimated us, DaCosta says. If you believe in your team and an opponent torments you, that resonates. DaCosta agreed to the framework of a trade with Tennessee general manager Ran Carthon. Ian, it sounds like he's saying DaCosta told him that they agreed to a trade on Henry and then Amy shut it down.
I haven't officially read the report, but it sounds like he's getting some information from the Ravens that they were close to making a deal.
But this isn't even like hidden in sourcing. This is DaCosta agreed to the framework of a trade. I mean, I think he's telling you. I think Eric DaCosta, I think, first of all, regardless of whether or not he's actually putting pen to paper and saying that Eric DaCosta told him, because it's not in quotes, where Eric DaCosta said, quote, we thought we had a deal done, end quote. That's not in there. But when he says DaCosta agreed to the framework of a trade with Tennessee general manager Ran Carthon, that's not, to me, that's not hidden. He is telling you that Eric DeCosta is telling him. It's obvious it's DeCosta the one who's telling him. But I think he's like legitimately openly saying that it was DeCosta who told him that they had a deal and that Ran agreed to it, and then the Titans shut it down. So somebody's lying. Either Rand's lying or Eric DeCosta's lying. And I don't know Eric DeCosta from a jar of Vicks. But I don't think we've ever heard about Eric DeCosta not telling the truth. So you can come to your own conclusions about who isn't telling the truth here. But just know, for the umpteenth time with the Tennessee Titans in the last 2 years, we've got another story that's somebody's not telling the truth. You guys make up your own opinions and decisions on that. I also think it's fascinating that Florio reported that it was Vrabel that put his foot down and said no, but Paul said that Vrabel was willing to move anything in order to get future assets back, which makes me think that Vrabel was for the Henry trade because, again, I think Paul is in the Vrabel satchel. So I would have to say that Vrabel wanted to do it. It makes me think less of Vrabel. But, again, we don't even know if it's true because we don't know who's telling the truth. Other than to say, Ian, can we play that cut again? Again, this is what it said. This is the report in The Athletic. You tell me if you think that there is any ambiguity here, if there is any gray area, any wiggle room. Quote, DeCosta agreed to the framework of a trade with Tennessee general manager Ran Carthon, a fourth-round pick that could have become a third had Henry reached certain production levels. However, others in the Tennessee Titans hierarchy apparently were not on board with the deal, so Henry played out the season in Nashville. Here's Rand's response.
Were you offered a fourth that could have turned into a third for Derrick last year?
No, I wasn't. I don't know where that came from. That's not my concern. But we had multiple teams, to call about Derrick and offer something that wasn't worth taking or worth even considering. And I communicated that with Derrick during that time. But no, we never agreed with anybody to do anything to move anybody.
Okay. There's no gray area there either. And let's not forget Derrick telling the boys on the bus it was close. Saying like, it was. Again, can we play that Derrick cut again, Ian? This was Derrick's recollection of that story.
Did you think you were going to? Because you were obviously in a lot of speculation, I'll say. I don't know how many conversations were taking place.
Well, I feel like it was close. It was close.
For real?
Like yeah.
You know something?
It was close. It was close, boys. It was close.
To who?
It was
in the playoffs?
Yeah. It was I know 2 for sure. It was, I don't know the other one. I don't know if that would have happened, but one of them, I felt like it was pretty close.
What makes you
a lot went down between that little saga with the trade and all that stuff.
Okay, so Ian, again, I'm not saying
he
one
said
way
it was
or another.
close.
Which one of the 2 stories we've heard? Which one does Derrick? And again, Derrick's the third story here. There's the Athletic story. There's Rand's side of the story. Which side of the story do you think Derrick more aligns with?
Well, it sounds like Derrick thought he was about to get moved for a minute.
It was close, boys.
So he was almost expecting it to go down.
I know of one. It was close, boys.
At least, don't be shocked if you get traded kind of situation here. So sounded like it was kind of close, but I don't know.
Tyler says Detective Jared is on the case. No, I'm not. I am not accusing anybody of anything. I am just saying that somebody is lying. That's it. If somebody comes to you, 2 people have a meeting, you see them at a restaurant, they're sitting down in the corner, they're having a discussion, and one guy says, we talked about baseball, and the other guy says, we talked about horse racing. Somebody's not telling the truth. And that's what this is. But I'm not Detective Jared because I'm not telling you, I'm not investigating to, say, oh, no, this is the one not telling you. I'm not doing that. I'm not. You come up with your own opinion on this. Dave has been waiting patiently. He's up next on the running back position for the Titans. Dave, go ahead.
Great to have you back, Jared.
Thank you.
You know where PFF has Tony Pollard ranked this year? 14th. Do you know where Derrick Henry's ranked?
I do know that Derrick Henry's grades are lower than Pollard's.
He is ranked second behind McCaffrey this year as running back. Pollard had 6 rushing touchdowns last year. I don't like the Derrick Henry for Pollard for anything. I think Derrick Henry should have stayed another year behind this better offensive line. I think they're going to miss him and Denico Autry on defense. And I'll hang up and let you talk. Thank you.
So I agree they're going to miss Henry and Denico. I will say you use Pro Football Focus. I do know at the time we took the Pro Football Focus grades when it came to free agency, and I think Pollard's running grades were very similar with Derrick's. And I want to say that PFF was actually telling us that Pollard was a better runner than Henry. So I don't know what ranking you're using, but from last year, the grades actually had Pollard better than Henry. Now, somebody texts into the text line and says, maybe none of them are telling the truth. They're saying maybe neither Eric DaCosta nor Rand Carthon are telling the truth. Then another texter says they are saying the exact same thing. I don't know how you got there. I don't know how you got there. DaCosta is saying we had a deal in place and then the Titans shut it down after we agreed to the deal. And Rand saying, no, that didn't happen. There is no overlap between those other than, we talked about Derrick Henry. Other than that, there is no overlap. Says you're digging so hard trying to talk bad about Rand. I'm not talking about Rand. I'm saying somebody's lying and I don't know who it is. I'm not saying who is lying. And if you're saying that I'm the one, if you're saying, Jared, you're saying Rand's lying, that's not true. I am not saying that. I will say this about the Titans and the Athletic, though. There's a lot of reports that come out in the Athletic, and then the Titans go either say the exact opposite or do the exact opposite. Remember when Diana reported that Vrabel wasn't going anywhere, and I said the next day on air, yeah, I don't care about that. And I think Diana's telling the truth, but I just think the Titans, sometimes don't always tell the truth. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 on the opening day of training camp. We continue. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
do you think Adams fits on this team, and maybe what role do you envision for him this year?
Oh, he's definitely a fit. Obviously, it's the early part of his career. He was under Denard. Now, Denard wasn't the coordinator per se, but someone that he's very familiar with, as well as Steve Jackson and Frank Bush. And so we have the opportunity to bring a guy in who's played at a very high level in this league. And we feel that, we keep him healthy and get him out there on the field. He can continue to make those plays. And, a guy like Hook, having Hook, still here gives us the versatility to bring guys in, whether it's a strong or a free, because Hook can play an interchangeable spot.
That was Rand Carthon on Jamal Adams. Let me just state for the record, I hate the Jamal Adams signing. I hate it. And the terms of the contract are basically veteran minimum. 1 year veteran minimum. And because health is a concern, even Rand Carthon said today, yes, when it comes to Jamal Adams, health is a concern, and that reflects why the Titans didn't invest a bunch in him. Here's what Rand said.
How big a concern is that recent health issue?
I mean, it's always a concern. That's one of the things when, we're talking about bringing guys in, and A-Rob is, and BG, all those guys we're looking at the health. That's the main thing. There have been guys here that we've brought in to sign and just couldn't get to that point where we felt comfortable with the health. I think the way our deal is structured with them, it's a prove-it deal for us and a prove-it deal for him. And I know Jamal, I know how he's intrinsically wired. He wants to prove to the world and to everybody that he can stay healthy and still play at a high level. And it's our job, as a training staff with Todd and Matt and Mike and those guys to make sure he's out there on the field as much as possible.
Okay, he said right there, it's a prove-it deal. It's prove it to us, it's prove it to him. And a lot of Titans fans, when they saw the term of the deal, they said, that's great. Low risk, high reward. But here's why I don't like the Jamal Adams signing. Especially when today I asked Rand about, so are you done at safety or, you're still in the mix? And he's like, well, we're interested in every position, which kind of told me, I think they think that they're good with Adams, Hooker, McCreary, Snead, and Awuzie, which you can do worse than that. I mean, that is solid, even if Adams never stays healthy or isn't even really that good anymore. But I don't like it. Because while, yes, it's a low risk in terms of money, it's not your money, and the cap's fake, so I don't care about that. But what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're done. That's the spot. We're done. It's taken care of. The end. Move on. And so if Jamal Adams does get hurt, which he gets hurt all the time, if Jamal Adams isn't good anymore and he hasn't recorded a sack since 2020 and he's got 4 interceptions over 7 years, if that's the case, then you're wasting the spot. And I'll give you an example of this exact situation biting the Titans in the ass in the past. Remember, the going rate for a starting left tackle in the NFL right now is, Ian, what, $25 million?
Which tackle you said?
A starting left tackle in the NFL. If a true starting left tackle hit the market, we're talking $25 million.
20 to 25, yeah.
I mean, if Robert Hunt's getting 20 to play guard, I mean, that's it. So, again, and I don't know, who's the most recent, or Trent Williams, or I think, isn't Tunsil around 30? Like,
he might be in the high 20s, 25-ish.
So we're talking about, again, a legitimate free agent tackle that's not going to be as good as Tunsil, who's one of the best. It's probably coming into the 20-25 range. They signed Andre Dillard for 10. And remember, we all said, well, Andre Dillard, he didn't work out in Philly, but that's because Jordan Mailata beat him out. And so he's got first-round talent. And so let's pay him $10 million and guarantee him $3 million next year, which is not a lot. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, and we can cut him and move on. And that's great. Except 3 days into training camp, it was obvious that Andre Dillard stunk, and there was nothing they could do about it at that point. And then the whole season, they were just swapping spit between Dillard and the 5 minutes PT played at left tackle and Duncan. I mean, it's like, take your pick. Who you want? They all stink. And so I worry when it comes to Adams, with Simmons out there, with some of these other guys that had been out there, like Marcus May, I worry they sign Adams, and it's like, we're done. And then you get out there, and Adams gets hurt 5 plays into the season like he did last year, or Adams isn't any good and doesn't get to the quarterback anymore. And I think his tackling grade last year per PFF was like 27, which is awful. And he's just not good anymore. And now, just like Dillard, it's like, well, I guess let's go put this other Scarbini in there. That's what I don't like about the Adams deal. That I think Adams kind of stinks. And so congratulations, you signed him for no money, but that's because he kind of stinks. So I understand, like, well, it's not a lot of money, Jared. Right, but it's a spot. And once you get into the season, it's harder to replace those guys, as we learned with left tackle last year. So TD has texted me about the Derrick Henry trade, I guess the he said. And TD says that he says he can say with confidence there was no trade agreement. And let me say this about TD. I think TD has connections into both organizations, both Tennessee and Baltimore. And I'm pretty sure that there's a good relationship. I don't think it's a buddy-buddy relationship, but I think there's a good relationship between Derrick Henry and TD. So he says there was no agreement. And if that's the case, then it's the Ravens that are lying. If Dan Pompei wrote that in The Athletic and we read it verbatim, that they said they had a deal, then the Ravens are wrong. And then if that's the case, that's not fair. But that's what TD said, and that's what Rand said, and that's what the Ravens said, and that's what Derrick said, and that you can make your own conclusions from that. Kyle says, it feels like Rand needs to create a nickname for every person he comes in contact with. That's sports. What are we talking about here? Too much. Randy says, it sounds like you and your dad enjoy talking Titans together. You should have him sit in with you for an hour one day. It would be fun to hear y'all talk Titans together and talk about some of the fun things y'all have experienced together, Titans related, and see if he gets excited like you do, see the difference in how you guys share the same experience. I would just say it like this. My dad would have no interest in that. I mean, absolutely zero interest in talking on the radio. And quite frankly, I mean, I love him, but I think you guys would find him to be kind of boring. I think if my dad was on the radio, I think he would be kind of boring because I think he would clamp up a little bit. And I'm not saying that he's got stage fright or anything like that. I'm just saying, I think that if he was talking, the way that we talk at the kitchen table, he would not be doing the same. That's how I feel. Also, that's Dan Le Batard's thing, not mine. My dad's got a job. I think he's okay with that. Boy, the text line's on fire right now. 615-737-1025. David in Arkansas says, I watched Rand answer the Henry question. He laughs it off and looks down. That to me is a sign of lying since we are about body language. So I was in the room when he said it, and I didn't analyze it like that. The one body language cue that I got from Rand was when we were talking DeAndre Hopkins today. And he was like, yeah, we try to keep family business inside, but there's some guys we've circled. And I'm like, was one of them Hopkins? And he was like, there's guys we've circled, but D-Hop, he's the man. We love him. We got a great relationship. We talk it straight. I'm like, okay. Yes, they would like to re-sign DeAndre Hopkins, which, by the way, for the record, I am in favor of. 615-737-1025. Boy, a lot of people are mad at me. You should be mad at the model, not at me. I'll explain that coming up next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. Live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios. Training camp practice starts tomorrow. Training camp started today. Practice starts tomorrow. And I am excited, and I will be there. And I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I freaking love this time of the year. And that's even with the idea that the Stillman and Company model, not Jared's opinion, but it's kind of Jared's opinion, but the Stillman and Company model sets the expectations for this season at 5-12. Ian, using the same model, came up with 4-13. It is what it is. When I was a kid, I used to think every year, no matter how bad the Titans were the year before, I used to think every year was going to be their year. Then when I stopped doing that was like right around when I went to college. And then out of nowhere, the 2008 Titans had the number 1 seed in the AFC. And then I started doing it again, and they went back to being bad. And so then I think I just kind of gave it up. And then they got good, for a little bit there during the Vrabel years. And it was exciting to watch them. But I never really thought, like, going into 2020 or 2021, I never thought, like, oh, this could be the year. And I never thought about 2019. The only time I started to believe in 2019 was when they beat the Ravens in the playoffs. I said, if Houston beats Kansas City, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. But then Houston didn't beat Kansas City. And then when they threw the touchdown pass to Dennis Kelly, and I went to the Kenny Chesney concert. My buddy Danny Rader, I think he's the best guitar player in all of Nashville, which is saying something in Nashville. The guy, I mean, for crying out loud, the guy's the musical director for the CMA. And for the CMA Awards and the Christmas show and whatever. And so we went to the Kenny Chesney show at Arrowhead while I was on vacation. And when I was at Arrowhead, like all those memories of 2019, that AFC title game just kept coming back to me. Like I was in the visitors' locker room at one point, and I remember how Marcus and I had a conversation in the corner about how he had just been a great guy for all those years, and I'm sorry that it didn't work out for him. And just, again, all those memories. But the only time I really felt like, oh my God, was when they threw that touchdown pass to Dennis Kelly to go up 17-7. And I was like, oh my God, if they stop Mahomes here, get it back and score again, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. And then they didn't. But as a kid, I used to believe every year was the year. And I know a lot of people want to do that. And maybe it is this year. Who knows? Nobody knew the Texans were going to be good. But the model is not necessarily based off of feeling. The model is based off of common sense. And you divide the games between the should wins and the should lose, the will wins and the will lose. You're not going on the road and beating the Houston Texans. And you're going to club the New England Patriots because they're awful and Jacoby Brissett's going to be their quarterback. Don't worry about it. And then you split the toss-up games. So, again, just for the record, the way we broke it down yesterday was will win New England, should win Minnesota, Washington. Toss-up, Chicago, Jets, Indy. Should lose Green Bay, Miami, the Chargers, Jacksonville, Houston, Cincinnati, Jacksonville. Will lose Buffalo, Detroit, Houston. That's how we got to 5-12. So again, we've done this every year. Robbie and Joe are smart enough to know how this works. If you listened yesterday, you heard us all break it down. We had Joe barged into the show. We explained it to him. And I sat him down. I said, how many games do you think the Titans are going to win? He said 8. And everybody said, I think they'll win 9. I think they'll win that. I think this, again, is you got to go game by game. Should they beat the Jets, who had the 3rd-ranked defense last year and have Aaron Rodgers a quarterback this year? No. Right now, given the information that we have, they should not beat the Jets. That is a toss-up. And some people, Ian, will have it listed as a should lose. So this morning, Robbie and Joe were crapping all over the 5-win model that the Stillman and Company show projected yesterday, or expects. Again, expect is the word. And here's what they said.
Like the Bears game. Sure. Toss-up game. Is that not a toss-up game? His point was, they'll be like a 6-point underdog. Okay, great. I mean, I don't know what Vegas is going to have, but they're playing a rookie quarterback and a team that's been bad, and I think that's a toss-up game.
Pause it.
Call me crazy.
Ian, what is the Chicago game on my model listed as?
I think it's a toss-up.
It's a toss-up. So Joe's like, I mean, is Chicago not a toss-up, Jared? It is a toss-up. Continue.
But they're playing a rookie quarterback in a team that's been bad, and I think that's a toss-up game. Call me crazy.
Me too.
I would agree. I mean,
Is the Jets a no way? No. That's not a no way win. Is the Packers at home? No way.
Stop it. Hold on. Stop
I
it.
wouldn't.
What did we have the Jets game listed as, Ian?
Maybe should lose or toss-up.
Toss-up. He's bitching about the model, and he's like, those games are toss-ups. They're toss-ups on the model, Joe. Continue.
That's not a no way win. Is the Packers at home? No way. I wouldn't say
not a
that.
no way. Huh.
Dolphins, Colts.
You're going 13-4.
Well, I mean, I'm going through this and like games that I just forget about it. I'm going to pretty much say that about Buffalo. I guess I'll say that about the Lions. Oh boy, wouldn't that be funny? I mean, they're going to beat the Patriots. I'm just going through these. Chargers. They probably should lose, but I don't know what the Chargers are going to be. They'll beat the Vikings at home. They can't beat the Jags at home. They got the Commanders on the road. Is it impossible to beat the Bengals at home?
So again, let's go through this. He starts by saying, I mean, I think Chicago, this model's, Jared's off his rocker. 5 wins. Old Stilly's acting crazy. I mean, Chicago and the Jets, those should be toss-ups, right? They are. Those are toss-ups. Then he says, I mean, I don't think Green Bay's a game they can't win. Green Bay is a should lose. Now, I don't know about you guys, but last time I saw Green Bay play, they had the San Francisco 49ers by the cojones in the divisional round of the playoffs, and their kicker stunk. You won 6 games last year, and your best player is not on the team anymore. You cannot expect where we sit today. You cannot expect the Titans with Will Levis and his 33 QBR from last year to beat the Green Bay Packers. You right now should lose to the Packers, given what we think of the Packers and what we think of the Titans, right? So that's why it's in the should lose. He even said they should lose to the Chargers. Guess what? That's a should lose. He said they'll beat the Patriots, they'll beat Washington, they'll beat the Vikings. Ian, where are those games?
Should win or will win.
So we gave you credit for that. The ones where I guess we disagree, because he's like, well, they're not going to beat Buffalo, they're not going to beat Detroit. And I have 3 will lose: at Buffalo, at Detroit, at Houston. Does anybody have a problem with those 3? Do you really think the Titans are going to Detroit to go beat that Lions team with Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs, and you really think you're going to beat that team? You know you're not going to beat that team. That's a will lose. Even Joe says it's a will lose. Where I guess we're disagreeing is Jacksonville. I don't think right now you should expect to beat Jacksonville. And then he said Cincinnati. He's like, is it crazy to think that they would beat Cincinnati? Yes! It's crazy to think that you should be. It's crazy to expect that you're going to beat Cincinnati. It's crazy to expect that. Cincinnati has the 2nd best quarterback in the NFL. They have 2 number 1 receivers. They have Zach Moss pounding the ball, and Zach Moss beat the crap out of you last year in Indianapolis to where your players said, oh, he was like Le'Veon Bell out there. Yes, you should lose to Cincinnati. Now, if Burrow gets hurt again, then it's a different story. But as of right now, I'm not expecting Burrow to get hurt, just like I'm not expecting Rodgers to get hurt with the Jets. You should lose to the Bengals. When Burrow's healthy, they're the 2nd best team over the last 4 years in the AFC. I mean, come on. It's like, what are we doing? So they're sitting here talking about the model and saying like, oh yeah, no, that's crazy talk. And then literally putting all the games for the most part, except the Jacksonville games apparently, putting all of those exactly where we put them. If Joe did this model, he would not have 8 wins for the Titans. He would not. Because again, Nobody with a brain, with a sense of reality. I had somebody tweet me yesterday. I had somebody who covers the White House for USA Today tweet me yesterday saying he thinks the Titans are going to Buffalo to beat the Bills this year. I'm like, what? What? Where do we come up with this stuff? If you do the model, you can't come away with 8 or 9 wins because the Titans are not expected to win those, because you can't expect the Titans, given the state of the team now. Now, the Titans might surprise all of us, but you can't expect it. There's no data there that should lead you to think that that's going to happen. Other than, well, I mean, anything can happen in the NFL. Yes. But this isn't a prediction. This isn't a proclamation. This isn't a guarantee. This is an expectation, what you expect. And so I'm going to defend the model because I think it's incredibly fair. And I think what happens is people just don't like the results, so then they crap on the system. It's like, well, I don't like that, so it's bull crap. And it's like, no, you don't like it because you want to believe that your team is good, but you decide that you don't want to believe the fact, no, we should beat the Jets with their third-ranked defense and Hall of Fame quarterback. With Tony Pollard running the ball? Like, what? Oh, my God. I expected better out of Joe today. I knew they were going to talk about it. In fact, I'm surprised they talked about it as little as they did. I thought they'd talk about it for the whole show. But I am disappointed, given that he knows how to structure these games. And then he went and structured them exactly where we were structuring them. So you can hope to be better. I hope this is the year. I do. I hope the Titans are in the Super Bowl. Nobody thought they'd be in the Super Bowl in 1999 except Bud Adams when he walked out to the season ticket holder scrimmage day out in a suit in 200-degree weather and said, we're going to be in the Super Bowl and all the things. Yeah. You know, that's like watching these political rallies. It doesn't matter who you are. People get up there and they're like, we are going to end everything you hate. And oh, yeah. I've lived now through, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. So I have lived through 6 presidents, and I'm thinking 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats of the 6, and none of them have brought world peace together or ended hunger or poverty or any of the things that every politician, we're going to end the, yeah! It's never happened. But that's what some people, we're going to beat the Bills this year. Yeah! Like, what? Oh, give me a break. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. It's 1025, 106 for the game.
little bigger picture, just what is your barometer for success in year one? What are some specific goals you have for this team that you think need to get?
Yeah, I try not to look too far ahead, but I would like to see an efficient offense, an offense that looks like we know what we're doing. The style of defense, you want guys to play within the scheme. You want to see the competitive nature, the attitude that we're looking for, the soundness of the scheme. I think that we're going to be a really competitive football team. And to put a number on wins or losses or expectations, I think a lot of it still remains to be seen. We have a lot of work to do to get to that point. And I'm excited about the work and the process to get there. And, I want to see us get better every day ultimately. And it's a cliche and it's a coach speak answer. I understand that, but that's the truth, really. I mean, I haven't gone much past, my meetings this afternoon I have to get ready for. So I'll let you guys determine what success looks like.
Come on, Brian Callahan. How many games? How many games should they win? How many games will they win? How many games, Brian Callahan? By the way, I always love it. Everybody asks these questions. And I really sometimes want to, Coach, how far away is this team from winning the Super Bowl? See what they have to say. So somebody texts into the text line. Again, we are going over the model that the Robbie and Rex Road program apparently has a hard time with. We're going over the model of the yesterday that led to the expectations of 5 wins. Guys, if you want to be mad at Ian. He expects 4 wins. I'm expecting 5. But again, it's what games they should win, what games they will win, what games they should lose, what games they will lose, and what games are toss-ups. And you split the toss-ups, and on from there you go. It's not very complicated. And I get angry when people are like, well, anything can happen in the NFL, Jared. Of course it can. That's why they should lose to the Dolphins. It doesn't mean that they will lose to the Dolphins. When they were down by 14 points with 2 minutes to go, they should have lost that game. They didn't, but they should have lost. But somebody texted into the text line and said, can you do a comparison segment of what's happened of the last 3 years of expectations? Ian, do we even have that anywhere?
I'd have to look through there.
I mean, so I looked through the text messages. We text the grids every day, and I looked through the text message, and then I got sad because apparently we did this in 2022, the day after Mark Howard passed away. And so once I saw that, I kind of got sad and didn't feel like digging anymore.
Yeah, it's fair.
But I will say this: every year they lose a will-win game, and every year they win a will-lose game. It is almost inevitable. Now, I don't think they did that last year, but for most of the years they've done something like that, where they've beaten Kansas City. Like they held Kansas City to 3 points in 2021 and then turned around and lost to Tyrod Taylor and the Texans. I mean, that is like a yearly.
Okay, this was from Monday, July 24th, 2023.
Okay.
Jared has them 12-5. I had them 10-7.
I'm guessing that I had the Texans as will wins.
I don't have the full list. I just it says Jared wants to know why he's so crazy. He's picking the Titans to win 12 games. So we did talk about that.
I expected 12. I got 7. I wanted to fire the coach and the GM start over. No, I got 6. I wanted to fire the coach and GM and start over. Why? Because they absolutely bombed on expectations. That's why I think it's fair. That's why I think it is fair.
Okay, looks like 2022, you also were 12-5. Caroline was 10-7.
Caroline was 10-7.
You were 12. Yeah.
I was 12-5.
So
Okay.
back-to-back 12-5.
So did I not say yesterday that if anything, I overshoot on the model?
I think you did say that.
I do. Every year I overshoot the model except for 2021. So that's actually a bad sign, given the 5 wins. Mike says, Ian, get him to talk about the Predators because he doesn't see it, but Will Levis is headed to the Hall of Fame. There you go, Texter. Will Levis is headed to the Hall of Fame. Come on, people. Where do you people come up with some of this stuff?
In 2021, you had them at 13-4. Caroline at 12-5, and myself at 11-6.
So I overshot the model then.
Yep.
So I've overshot the model every year over the last 3 years, and now you're mad at me for 5. Ian might be right at 4. Oh my God, they're going to be picking first overall, aren't they?
Let's hope not first, but
oh my God,
it could be top 5. Every mock draft we've seen for next season has the Titans picking top 5.
Does does this cross the boundary of nobody gets in trouble about something that hasn't happened yet?
Yeah, probably.
When I say
They're going to
like,
be picking top 5 or
if
first
they're
overall.
picking first overall, like somebody should be fired, right? Even though it's a rebuild year, somebody ought to get canned if you're picking first.
I don't know about that. Brand new regime everywhere.
No, it's not. The GM, the president, the assistant GM, they were all here last year. They are not new. Alex says the schedule is easy. He says it is easy. All right, let's take New England, Minnesota, and Washington aside because they're in the win category, so you don't have to worry about that. What are the easy games? Are the Bengals easy? Is Aaron Rodgers easy? Is the Bears team that everybody thinks is going to make the playoffs because they were close last year and they're picking Caleb Williams in the first round? Is that game supposed to be easy?
I don't think any division games you can qualify as technically easy this year.
You think Houston and Jacksonville are going to be easy? I don't think they're going to be easy. You think Buffalo's going to be easy? Detroit?
Going to
Green
LA?
Bay? I don't think the Titans have ever won a road game against the Chargers. Ever. And there have been some horrendous Charger teams over the years.
Yeah, we've talked about it. The last place schedule this year, you pulled the Chargers and Cincinnati as 2 as your last place teams.
I mean, you pulled 2 of like the 7 best quarterbacks in the NFL with 4th place finishes. This is not an easy schedule, folks. Like, this is not easy. In your first 4 games, Chicago has all the hype in the world. And maybe it'll be good that Chicago is overhyped and Caleb Williams is, I think, a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And so maybe that'll all be good. But the first game, it will be a zoo there. And I know that happened with Cleveland in 2019, but your team in 2019 was the second best team in the NFL. And this is not the second best team in the league. That's going to be hard to win. Then week 2, you get the Jets. And not only do the Jets have the Jets last year had the 3rd ranked defense in the NFL, but they also won more games than you with a horrendous quarterback. Zach Wilson was awful, and Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Famer, and as of right now, he's back in. And they play San Francisco on Monday Night Football in week 1. And what is the last thing that you want to have happen before you play a team? Them to get embarrassed, because then they're going to take it out on you. Then there's Green Bay, and we know what they did last year. Then there's Miami. Now, I think there is some solace in Miami that it's a primetime game, and Tua sucks in the primetime games, but Tua is usually pretty good against the bad teams. So, I mean, guys, you're starting to act crazy. One texter says, the guy that always gets mad at Vrabel, says, you overshot the model because you didn't understand how bad Vrabel was. I mean, in fairness, I think I'm the guy who understood Vrabel the best. I'm like, there are going to be some games that you have no business winning, you'll win those. And then there's going to be some games you have no business losing, and you'll lose those. And what do we call that? The Vrabel special. And we were on that year. I think we were on the Vrabel special before Caroline even showed up. Like, we were like, oh, yeah, they're always going to lose some stupid-ass game, and they're always going to win some game on primetime. Like, remember that COVID game on a Tuesday against Buffalo, where the Titans hadn't practiced in 2 weeks and Buffalo had just gone on the road and smoked the Raiders. And I think they were like a 16-point favorite, and they came in here and the Titans just absolutely crushed them. That's the Vrabel special, folks. So I understand the Vrabel special, but it doesn't affect the model. Again, these are expectations. Oh, goodness. One texter says the Titans will be the Texans of 2023. 2023. One texter says, Jared, you got me fired up. Tua sucks. The Raiders suck. Minnesota will suck. The Bengals are all about getting paid now. And the Chargers suck. All right, I'm going to agree with you on Tua. I think Tua is average, and I would not give him $50 million. I mean, I haven't thought much about the Raiders and if they're good or bad or not, but Gardner Minshew is going to be their quarterback. He beat you twice last year. This time he's got Devontae Adams, and you don't play the Raiders this year. So, like, I mean, as much as you can be like, the Raiders suck, Jared. That's great, but you don't play them, so that doesn't really matter. Minnesota See, I think when we talk about overshooting the model, I think I'm being kind to you by giving Minnesota as a should win, because Minnesota still has some good pieces on defense. They went out. I know they lost Danielle Hunter, but they signed Jonathan Grenard, who's probably younger, maybe a little bit more in his prime. They had 2 first-round draft choices, one of whom I believe was Dallas Turner, who I think is going to be a pretty good player. And they've got the best receiver in the NFL, and they've got Jordan Addison. TJ Hawkinson is a really good tight end. They've got a solid offensive line, and I think Sam Darnold can play quarterback.
They have a pretty good team if they can get quarterback situated.
And they've got a guru coach like you. They've got a guy from the McVay-Shanahan womb, just like you do. They've got him in Kevin O'Connell. So I think I'm being a little kind when you're sitting there and you're telling me, oh, Minnesota, they suck. I'm like, Minnesota's basically come out and said that they don't think J.J. McCarthy's going to play quarterback this year. And you know how I feel about sitting quarterbacks. I'm for it. Remember, I told you if I ran the Titans last year, when I drafted Will Levis, I'd have gone right to the podium and said Ryan Tannehill is our starting quarterback and would not have moved off of that. Now, when Tannehill got hurt and Levis played the way he played, you can't take the young guy back. But I'm telling you, like, I think Minnesota's smart, at least at coach. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Okay, there is something that the Titans finally admitted to today that burns my ass. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in on the program. That's 615-737-1025. Again, training camp has started. It's Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. So training camp starts tomorrow. And today, Brian Callahan came out, said T'Vondre Sweat is good to go, which makes me think that he passed the conditioning test, that he will be on the field, that the big boy will be out there. But there is something that truly burned my tushy today. And it was when Brian Callahan was asked about L'Jarius Sneed. Again, we've talked about Sneed's knees, and nobody in the league wanted those knees except for you. And then I was told by an agent that, well, what the Titans could do is they could guarantee the $55 million. And then after they guarantee the $55 million, they could put a waiver in there that if the knees are an issue, then it voids the guarantee and then you get the money back. And then Caroline asked Sneed about that. And because the Titans had a surprise Rand Carthon press conference that day, they didn't want to advertise it so that people would go to ask Rand those questions. So Caroline asked Sneed herself. Sneed got all crappy about it, but said that there was no waiver on the knee. And I thought, how could there not be a waiver on the knee? And the Titans, oh no, Jared, you guys said, look, hey, Sneed said, Sneed's knees are fine. Don't worry. You guys said, look at the tape. He plays all the games. Don't worry. This was Brian Callahan today talking about Sneed's knees.
Is there a separate approach for Sneed, given some of the ways he's been managed in the past?
Yeah, he'll be managed differently, just because that's how he's, he managed to play almost every snap last year, and so that's ultimately that's the goal is be healthy and available on Sundays. And so to get him to that point, we have a program in place for him that we've consulted with him on and our trainers and doctors. And so we should be all good there.
Oh, so there is an issue with the knee that you have to work around after an entire offseason of saying, no, we don't know, no, not a worry. Oh, okay. Trevor Maddux joins us now on the program, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters, and ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Let's start with the first day of practice tomorrow. Trevor, you've had a lot of first practices in your life. What are the big things that matter tomorrow at training camp for the first practice?
Getting through the first training camp practice. I mean, it's you've been through the off-season OTAs and there's a lot of work there. You've been through the strength and conditioning program in the weight room and out running sprints and all that. None of that gets you ready for actual full pad practice. And that's why the first day you go out and get through it and you start to get really sore. Then by the fourth day, you are typically so sore it's hard to get out of bed in the morning. And then that soreness starts to alleviate once your muscles start to get accustomed now to the new stresses and new activities. So the first day of training camp is not about playing well. It's about staying disciplined. It's about being mentally focused, and it's about getting those first hits under your belt.
Trev, Brian Callahan came out today and said T'Vondre Sweat is ready to go. There's 11.5 sacks into Nico Autry that are now in Houston from last year. And the Titans really didn't do a whole lot in free agency on the defensive line. There's a lot on Sweat's plate, being the 38th pick. So what should we expect from Sweat? How much should we expect Sweat? And how much of a difference can Sweat make right away?
I'm high on Sweat. I thought, drafted in the second round with the 38th pick, I thought that was a great pick for the Titans because I think Sweat, coming out of college, was a first-round talent with first-round impact on games. Now, there's been a lot of disappointment among Titans fans that he missed almost all of OTAs and we haven't seen much of him, et cetera. Who knows about his weight, what's going on with the off-field issues that he may have exhibited, in college and things like that. Those things don't bother me at all. I think that the Titans need to, in some ways, treat him like an old grizzled veteran early and not wear him out physically early. They need to bring him along slowly so that football conditioning can happen without a physical setback that would make him miss practices, in early in training camp. So, I could see them giving him a bit of a pitch count when it comes to the hardest working camp in the first few days just to see how he responds. Because I believe that by the time, if he doesn't have a setback, by the time we get to the beginning of the season, he'll be ready to do what he can do. And what he can do, this defense needs.
Trevor, I hate the idea of him on a pitch count because he needs to play a lot this season. And if he passes the conditioning test, that should mean that he's good enough to go. I mean, they are putting a lot on him, to be productive right away. And it won't be a good sign if he starts off slow.
Yeah, you're right about that from a conceptual standpoint. So I don't know that they'll put him on a pitch count. They may just throw him to the wolves and see how he responds. I'm just saying if it's me, and the reason is that you and I agree, Jared, that they are counting on him a lot. The question is, how do you get from today to opening day where he has the best chance opening day to be the best player he can be? And making him make up for the physical work that he missed during OTAs in the first week of training camp gives you a better chance of having another setback and having him miss more time. The thing about this guy is that what he does so well is just be Godzilla. It takes two blockers to contain the guy, and I think in the NFL it'll be the same thing as it was in college from that standpoint. And from a pass rushing standpoint, he doesn't have a lot of moves. He doesn't make a lot of sacks. But with two guys blocking him, that means guys coming off the edge typically only have one guy to block them unless they take a running back out of the pass pattern. And then he is able to push those two guys into the face of the quarterback. So big, long, tall guys like Harold Landry and Arden Key coming around the corner can reach out and swat that ball, swat the quarterback's arms, even if they don't actually win the corner. If they just turn the corner because the quarterback can't step up and get out of their way. This is what he can bring to their pass rush, in addition to just being a huge rock as a run stuffer in there. And so they need him healthy in order to be able to do that. And in order for him to be healthy, it's not about today. It's not about next week. It's about opening day. And right now, the fact that he did not go through the heavy drills that they went through in OTAs to get his body ready for the beginning of training camp, the way the other defensive linemen have done and offensive linemen, means that they need to kind of I believe, they should give him a little bit more runway to get him up to speed to make sure that something doesn't happen to make him miss more time.
So Trevor Maddox is with us. Nicholas Petit-Frere will start the training camp on the PUP list. Brian Callahan saying that it was a knee injury. They had a knee surgery cleaning up something. So once again, my right tackle, Trevor, whether it's a gambling suspension, a shoulder injury, now a knee injury, he will not be available for the start of camp. The one that everybody keeps telling me, no, they'll be fine with him at right tackle. When can I be actually worried about his availability issues?
Well, it's kind of the same way with Sweat, in that when he does come back, he missed all of the OTAs. And you and I stood out there during practices and watched those offensive linemen do some very physical drills where they have a heavy sandbag and they squat down into a pass blocking position and they work that sandbag. It builds your core muscles. It builds your thighs. It builds your shoulder girdle. I mean, in ways that you just can't do in the weight room. And the various things that they did in the offseason for the offensive linemen were very much to get them ready to be able to take on the extra stresses that Coach Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach, will put on him in camp. And Nicholas Petit-Frere didn't go through any of that. And so I think they should not necessarily put him on a pitch count, but I think they need to pay close attention to him and be willing to pull him out of certain drills if it looks like some things are starting to go south on him, because he's another guy along with Sweat that they cannot afford to have a setback and miss time. Now, having said that, if he's fully healthy, I think he's got the talent to be at least adequate at right tackle. If he's not, or if he's not fully healthy, one guy I know you love is John Ojukwu, right? You love that guy.
Love him.
Yeah. But let me. The thing is, though, I think he's intriguing. He got a lot of work in the OTAs, and in the drills, he actually looked really good. You know, at Boise State, he had 51 starts. I mean, the guy was second team All Mountain West tackle once, and then his last 2 years there, he was first team All Mountain West, both of his final 2 years at Boise at left tackle, but he started his career at right tackle, so he could play both sides. And the thing he needs to get better at is his technique in space. That's kind of what held him back, and that's why he didn't get drafted, because, you know, he's big and strong and powerful, but in space, he wasn't good enough. Well, if he can pick up the coaching from Bill Callahan and get better in space. I'm not saying he's going to be a great right tackle, but I'm saying he could actually push for that starting job until they get somebody better and be that guy who is what we hope for, at minimum, an adequate right tackle.
More with Trevor Maddich, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters, and ESPN Bet Sportsbook next. And we will talk about Will Levis and expectations for training camp. We'll do that. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
Between, putting in an offense and bringing along a young quarterback, and yet at the same time knowing that those same mistakes, if they happen in a game, could be incredibly costly. How do you manage that in training camp?
Yeah, that's a good question. The ability to test in practice for a quarterback, a throw, a tight window throw, maybe he wouldn't make in a game. You have to put a little bit of faith and trust in the quarterback that they're going to try some things in practice and it's encouraged to, with the understanding that maybe if that was a game, you might not make that throw. Now, the trust comes in is that if it really is a game, would you still make that throw? We don't know that. until you actually get out there and play. But I think Will's got a pretty good grasp, and Mason and Malik as well, about when it's appropriate to be more risky and more aggressive than maybe you might be in a normal game on a 1st and 10 than you are in a 7-on-7 period in practice. And so there is an experimentation that they're allowed. There's some freedom there, but we always coach it afterwards. Like that's good. I'm glad you decided to try that. Just understand that if this was 1st and 10 in the first quarter of the first game, we're probably going to check this ball down. And they work through. That's on them to work through, but we coach that part of it when they're in those positions.
That was Brian Callahan today. Will Levis tomorrow be taking snaps as QB1 for the first time ever at training camp. Trevor Maddich is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters, and ESPN Bet Sportsbook. So, Trevor, if you were on Will Levis's team or you were coaching Will Levis, what would you expect to see out of practice? And what should be alarmingly bad or really should excite us? Or what should be like, hey, that's a coachable moment. He'll learn through that.
Yeah, those are a couple different things, Jared, and they're important things. What I'm expecting is timing. I want to see him throw the ball on time. And so if he makes plays because he drops back and he doesn't like what he sees and he hesitates a while and then he starts to run around and then throws the ball down the field and scores a touchdown, I don't care about that at all. What I want to see is drop, set, throw. I want to see him recognize what the defense is doing, know after the snap, because a lot of times you won't know what the coverage is until after the snap because they're in disguises. After the snap, to be able to decipher it quickly and know at least where his first read should be. And then 1st and 2nd, and then 1st, 2nd, and 3rd as he learns this new offense. Those are the things I'm looking for. The things that don't bother me, Jared, especially early in camp, are, what the coach was talking about. If it looks like he makes a bunch of bad throws into triple coverage and they're intercepted and then that's terrible, right? Well, it might be terrible, but it's not just that. He's trying to see what he can do in terms of fitting the ball into certain windows. The coaches also need to see what the receivers can do. The quarterback needs to know what he can expect from receivers. Who can he trust to go up in coverage and make a play, even though it seems like there's not much of a play there to be made? And so in training camp, especially with the young receivers, the new receivers, quarterbacks will give them a chance to prove themselves. And if it ends up being an interception because the receiver didn't fight through and get the ball, well, quarterback probably wouldn't have thrown that ball anyway in the game, and he definitely won't now to that guy because he didn't show in camp that he can make the quarterback look good in that kind of a situation. So it tends to look like the quarterback is doing poorly when those kinds of throws are made, but often either they're testing themselves, they're testing the receiver, or the coach himself will say, hey, hit this receiver right now because we want to see what he's going to do. And so it's not always on the quarterback. So for Levis, it's not just let's complete a lot of passes and stuff like that. It is to start with recognition and timing and then let things settle in after that. Because keep in mind also that this defense has shown that not only will it be aggressive on game day, it's aggressive against their own guys. In OTAs, they were firing from all over the field to pressure the quarterback. They were playing very aggressive coverage, and it was very difficult for any of the quarterbacks to complete passes on the inside. I mean, it was the outside throws along the sideline that they had the best chance to complete passes on because the defense was ahead of the offense, and that's understandable in a new scheme. So, I think what we look at for Levis in terms of critical thinking is the most important thing. Critical thinking. Throw on time to the right spot and build from there.
Trevor Maddich is with us on the program. Brian Callahan today said he's going to play the starters in the preseason, says that he's going to put them together, that they need the work, they need the reps, wouldn't say how much, says that he may change his mind. But I heard that, and it was music to my ears. My question for you is, how much work do you think Will Levis needs in the preseason, and how beneficial do you think the preseason can be to the offensive line?
Well, he needs all of it, and so does the offensive line. The offensive line is the one group that requires the most intricate choreography among any of the groups, and it's the choreography that's easiest for the defense to break down. Because when they start to run stunts, those offensive linemen need to be on the same level. They need to understand what the guy next to him is doing, what he's capable of doing, et cetera. It takes a lot of reps at full speed to get that down. As far as Levis is concerned, look at the quarterbacks in the division. You've got at Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence. He's been there forever now compared to the other quarterbacks in the division. C.J. Stroud had a full year as a starter last year. Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis started a few games, and then he had to back out because he got hurt. And then you've got Levis, who got to play a lot last year, but in a completely different system. So Levis is the only guy in the division at quarterback who actually is coming back to the same system, or at least coming back to a certain familiarity. And so, he needs all the reps he can possibly get. Now, the hard thing is that when you've only got 3 preseason games, because the NFL went down to that when they went to 17 regular season games, that's really bad for young quarterbacks, for new coaches installing new systems. It's really bad for a team like the Titans, who need to develop depth, but they also need to develop starters. So in those 3 preseason games, every time the starters are in there, your depth is sitting on the bench, and you're going to need them down the road. Every time your depth is in the game, your starters who need to get work together and work in the new system are not getting that work at game speed. So I think it's really awful that the NFL took that 4th preseason game away, and I love it that Coach Callahan is going to give his starters a lot of work in those 3 games.
Well, get ready for them to take away another one, because they are going to go to 18. Trevor is with us. So at right tackle right now, it's Nicholas Petit-Frere, Jalen Duncan, Jaron Christian, and John Ojukwu. Petit-Frere is going to start on PUP. At right guard, it's going to be Sadiq Charles, Dylan Radin, Daniel Brunskill battling it out for that spot. I talked to Ryan Harris, the former Notre Dame offensive lineman, won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning in Denver. And I talked to him on Sirius, and we were talking about the Giants, and he said the problem with the offensive lines in the NFL, it's not the practice time. It's that there are not enough good offensive line coaches in the NFL. And then brought up Kansas City's offensive line coach as an example of a guy who flies under the radar but is a huge part of the Chiefs' success. You played the offensive line in the NFL. Is it as simple as there's 4 or 5 good offensive line coaches? I remember when Mike Munchak was here, and it was like it didn't matter who they put on the line, they'd figure it out. Is it that there's 4 or 5 good offensive line coaches in the league, and the Titans have one of them, so they'll be able to figure out the right side? Or is it more than just the coach?
Well, it's more than just the coach, but he's right that there are not nearly as many really solid offensive line coaches in the NFL as you would think there would be. When I played for 12 years, and I played with some of the best offensive line coaches of their generation. I mean, Jim Hannafin with Washington, Alex Gibbs when I was in Indianapolis, who went on to the Broncos and won Super Bowls there. Larry Bechtel with the Jets, which is a name that most people don't know, but he's one of the best teachers that I was ever coached me. He was fantastic. But I also played for some offensive line coaches that this is in the NFL, if you did what they told you to do, you were guaranteed to fail. One of those guys, after I retired, had been bounced out of the NFL finally, and he was coaching in the World League of American Football for the team in London. And I was broadcasting a season of World League games over there. So I came out to practice and watched him coach. He was coaching offensive linemen who were there because they want to get to the league. They want to get to the NFL. And they were drinking up everything that he was telling them. And what he was telling them guaranteed that they would fail. And I didn't say a word because it wasn't my place. But that was in the NFL. And that was when I was playing. So, it's the thing about the coaching of technique for offensive line is that an offensive line coach, any coach really, but in this case, that position, can't make you better than you can be. But it can get all of your potential out of you by teaching you the right technique. Because as an offensive lineman, if your technique is correct, meaning if you have good footwork and your hands are inside in the right place, and if you're moving your feet in the right way, it will require the defender that you're blocking to break you down before he can shed your block and go pursue the tackle. And the longer it takes him to do that, the better chance the offensive play has to work. And so your technique is massively important. And a guy like Bill Callahan can get the most out of the potential of each individual. That's why when you talk about Ojukwu, you know, the guy that's now competing at right tackle, second year guy, or first year guy, I guess technically, out of Boise State, who's on the practice squad most of last year for the Titans. You know, he was a really good college football player. He had almost 2,000 snaps in the time that he played there and gave up 11 sacks. And so the deficiencies that he has of technique and space, if he has the capability at all, Coach Callahan will get it out of him. And that's why it's important to have that kind of a coach. Keep this in mind also, that in college with up-tempo offenses, which are many of them now, they tend to not coach technique in practice so much as they go as fast as they can go and then coach technique off the tape in the meeting room. And so they come to the NFL not knowing how to put their hand in the dirt in a three-point stance, not knowing, you know, not being great technicians because of all that. And
that's like teaching somebody how to drive by watching tape.
Well, that's kind of it. But in college, they make up for that deficiency by running plays so fast that the defense can't keep up.
Yeah.
In the NFL, it doesn't work quite that way. So this is where coaching in the NFL is kind of like remedial math in college. You know, you got to get guys up to speed, and then you can find out how good they can be.
Trevor Maddox is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, where experience matters, and ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Trevor, we will have practice to discuss with you next week.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yep. Trevor Maddox on the program. First practice tomorrow for the Titans. And coming up next, I think Rand Carthon and I are on the same page. We'll get to that next. First, though, the Game Summer Ticket Tour is back and presented by Green River Whiskey. Join our own Joe Dubin at MJ Sports Bar and Grill at 1253 Northwest Broad Street in Murfreesboro this Thursday from 4 to 6 as he gives away tickets to upcoming concerts in Nashville, including Bush, Train, Dierks Bentley, and more. Also, get signed up for the grand prize, tickets to a Preds home game, Sounds game, and the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com/tour. Green River Distilling Company, Owensboro, Kentucky. Alcohol volume varies by product. Please drink responsibly. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. A little bit of breaking news. The Minnesota Vikings, we were talking earlier today about how much, like, what the going rate for a left tackle is. Christian Darrisaw just signed a contract extension. It is 4 years, $113,077,000 guaranteed. So 28 a year for Christian Darrisaw. By the way, Kaharski goes on the morning show tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and he bitches all the time about how I take Rick Spielman, the former general manager that's now on Sirius, that I take Rick Spielman's word seriously. He's like, hey, the fire general manager. His last 2 first-round picks as GM of the Vikings, Justin Jefferson and Christian Darrisaw. Ian, I'd say he did pretty well with those 2 picks.
Not bad players.
I mean, I'd say those are some pretty good players. So just keep that in mind. So speaking of contracts, the Titans lost a guy who was very productive this past year to Nico Autry, who had 11.5 sacks, to the rival Houston Texans. Why? Because Danico, who was making $7 million, was facing free agency, and they let her enter the year, and he had a good year, and then he's now $11.5 million. Titans didn't pay that. And now they got to figure out how to replace Danico. Well, don't let that happen again with DeAndre Hopkins, right? And yesterday I said, I've thought a lot about this. I'd give DeAndre Hopkins a contract extension. Today, Rand Carthon was asked about a DeAndre extension, gave us the coach talk on it, and then kind of let us know what he really thinks.
As you start the year, any thought on DeAndre Hopkins and extending him? Like, have you talked to Kelton and those guys about that at all?
We've identified a number of guys that, we'd like to continue to move forward with, and eventually take care. But you guys have heard me, we're going to keep family business in terms of talking about their contracts and what's next for them. But we as a staff, we have identified some guys that, we'd like to have here, long term.
Is DeAndre one of them?
He's one of the guys that's on our team, and and we've talked about a number of guys on the team to have those conversations. One thing I appreciate about D-Hop is if you guys have gotten to know him, D-Hop is straightforward, and and D-Hop and I, we can have some straightforward conversations, and we have, and we do, and so D-Hop knows how we feel about him. And I think that's a big thing, especially for a veteran, at this stage in his career. And I think the way he's shown up here, the way he's bought into a new staff kind of shows how he feels about us and what we have going.
Translation, yes, we'd like to re-sign DeAndre Hopkins. So here's what I propose. I propose an extension with DeAndre in which the Titans, he's making $14 million this year, which is chump change for a wide receiver. Now, I don't think DeAndre is going to break the bank and get into the $30 million range. He's not in his prime. He's 32. But as we brought up yesterday, D. Mace had over 400 catches and almost 5,000 yards after he turned 32 years old. And DeAndre's game is not speed and agility and leaping and what Julio Jones' game was, which goes away with age. It's shiftiness. It's combative catches. It's, the things that DeAndre, he's wiry. The way that he moves around in order to make, that's what they've got in DeAndre. And I think that because I'm not a guy who banks on the best case scenario, but sometimes it's okay to invest in that, which is Levis and Hopkins have good chemistry now. Let's extend him so we don't lose him if they grow even more together. So here's what I'm proposing. DeAndre is making $14 million in cash this season. Let's give him $6 million more. Let's make it 20. Calvin Ridley, still the highest paid receiver on the team at $23 million. So it's not like you're upsetting any apple cart. But let's give DeAndre $4 million this year. And let's give DeAndre $14 to $18 million for next year. They'll probably want $18 million, but let's only guarantee $4 million of that. So we're committing to $10 million guaranteed, the 6 this year and the 4 next year. And we're giving DeAndre a raise to $18 million, which after CeeDee Lamb signs, after Jamar Chase signs, T. Higgins will sign in free agency somewhere else. the going rate for a starting wide receiver in the NFL will be, and I'm talking average, I'm not talking Justin Jefferson, but it'll probably be in the $27, $28 million range, and I'm giving DeAndre 18. And if it doesn't work out, so I am hoping for the best case scenario, which is he and Levis continue to grow the way that they were performing last year. If it doesn't work out, you can get out of that contract, give DeAndre the $4 million, and go on with your life. That doesn't seem too complicated, does it? And the incentive for DeAndre to take this, because I'm sure there's a part of DeAndre that says, well, I'll get another 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. And once I do that, that'll be worth more than $18 million on the open market, but he doesn't know that. The reason DeAndre will take it is because he doesn't know that $18 million is more than that. And not only does he not know that $18 million that he could get that next year, but he's also getting a $6 million raise. And I think at this point in time in his career, given where the market is, DeAndre is absolutely a $20 million player. And while it's great, and trust me, I love a great deal. I love paying less for something than I have to. But while it's great to pay DeAndre Hopkins less than he's worth at $14 million, we're trying to make sure that DeAndre, who is, for the most part, outside of getting a haircut in the locker room, DeAndre, for the most part, has done everything the right way around here. We're trying to show DeAndre, like Rand said in that cut, hey, he knows we appreciate him. We know he appreciates us. We're trying to keep that together. So I know you guys think all I do is bang on Rand Carthon. That's not true. Because right now, if they let him go into the season, then DeAndre is gone at the end of the year if he has a good year. And I don't want that. And I think they know. I think they learned their lesson with Danico. I think that they're circling, saying, hey, let's get a deal done with DeAndre Hopkins. Some of you will say, but Jared, what about T. Higgins? What about? You don't know if you can get T. Higgins. You don't know if T. Higgins is going to be healthy. Again, is T. Higgins at $28 million next year going to be that much better than DeAndre at $18 million next year? DeAndre Hopkins, I'd bring him back. And I do it now, before we start practicing, before the games, before he has the opportunity to say, you know what? Let me just play my way to free agency. No. I get the deal done now. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in on that. Add that to the list, 615-737-1025. We continue. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game.
But you also have to say, as a GM to the owner, and I've said it on a couple of occasions, once they get to free agency, once we go beyond the start of the season, you have to assume he's leaving. Or you're going to tag him one way or the other. Simple as that.
That was Bill Polian, Hall of Fame general manager all those years in Buffalo and Indianapolis. I think he's got a little bit more experience doing this than we do. Again, I know Paul has such an issue with the fact that I listen to former general managers, and I'm like, that's a pretty good point made by that former general manager. And he's like, they're former general manager for a reason. I'm like, yeah, I'll listen to Rick Spielman and Bill Polian and Floyd Reese. I'll listen to those guys because I think they've got a pretty good idea. So we're talking about re-signing DeAndre Hopkins. And let that cut. Ian, let's play that cut again because I think it's very important for people to hear. This is how long? 14 seconds?
18.
18 seconds. And I want you to remember this cut because this is Bill Polian, who's got a gold jacket. You don't have a gold jacket. I don't have a gold jacket, but this is Bill Polian. And I want this to be burned into your brain when similar situations like this DeAndre, like last year's Danico, when these situations come up, this is reality.
But you also have to say, as a GM to the owner, and I've said it on a couple of occasions, once they get to free agency, once we go beyond the start of the season, you have to assume he's leaving. Or you're going to tag him one way or the other. Simple as that.
Okay. Once you get to the season and they're a free agent, you have to assume he's leaving. So if you want to get a DeAndre Hopkins deal done, you've got to get it done now. And take that, again, apply that for the next 20 years in the NFL. You let a guy who's going into the season with an expiring contract and you haven't worked out a deal, they're going to free agency. And I think Dak is the perfect example of this. Dak cannot be tagged in Dallas. At the end of the year, between teams like the Giants, the Steelers, the Titans, there will be a handful of teams, the Raiders, a handful of teams that do not have a quarterback. It's that way every year. This past year, going into the offseason, Minnesota didn't have a quarterback. Chicago didn't have a quarterback. Pittsburgh didn't have a quarterback. Denver didn't have a quarterback. A lot of teams didn't have quarterbacks. So there will be teams that don't have quarterbacks. And when Dak Prescott gets out there, and I'm not the biggest Dak Prescott fan in the world, but when Dak Prescott gets out there, let's say Levis is a bust, and Dak Prescott's out there, you're not going to be interested in bringing Dak in? Had bad quarterback play for 2 years. You have a chance of bringing Dak Prescott. Well, it's going to cost you $60 million. And the Giants are going to be interested too. And the Steelers are going to be interested too. And the Cowboys are going to be interested too. And so now it's $62 million because he's got an offer for 60 from New York. And, hey, it's New York. So now you got to offer. You see what I'm saying? And Dak can't be tagged. The Ravens never ran into this problem with Lamar because even though he was playing on the fifth-year option, they always knew they were going to tag him. They always knew. Yeah, we'll tag him. Once the guy gets to free agency, he's gone. And Polian's telling you that. So Kyle texts in and he says, I would give DeAndre Hopkins $14 million next year because nobody else will pay that. Did anybody think Azeez Al-Shaair was going to get $11 million a year? Did anybody think that? Azeez made like 5 last year for the Titans. And Azeez was fine. I mean, I thought he was kind of a day late and a dollar short way too often, but it's certainly better than what they have now. Ian, did you think Azeez was going to cash in at $11 million a year?
Not for an inside backer, no, probably not.
I mean, what do we think? Like 7, 8, something like that?
Yeah, sure. I guess it only takes one team, but yeah.
So to say like, oh, nobody will give DeAndre more than $14 million next year, you don't know that. The question I have is how much does DeAndre mean to you? And quite frankly, if I'm projecting this out, if I'm Matthew Berry and I'm fantasy footballing this, I expect more production from DeAndre Hopkins than I do from Calvin Ridley, and they're paying Calvin Ridley $23 million a year. I find DeAndre to be more dependable and more of kind of a proven player than Calvin Ridley. So I'm going to give DeAndre the money up front and next year. I'm going to give him more money because I don't think, and again, I don't want to speak for his representation. They would know better than I would. Ian, I don't think he turns down a $6 million raise this year and $18 million next year, 4 of which is guaranteed.
Yeah, I guess that sounds about fair market value. He probably would get more in the open market, though, don't you think?
Maybe, but he's not getting an extra $6 million anywhere else for this year.
Not for this year.
And so that, to me, that's part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, too, there's not a contract. This is not baseball or hockey. There is not a contract in the NFL that is so bad that a team cannot get out of it. The worst contract in the history of the NFL. I take that back. There's one contract in the history of the NFL that is so bad that a team cannot get out of. You want to know what contract I'm talking about?
Is it Dak?
No. That's not a bad contract. I mean, Dak's been worth $40 million a year.
Maybe Rodgers.
Deshaun.
Oh, they did fully guarantee his.
That's the one. That's the stupidest contract. I can't believe they did that. Well, I can, but it's the dumbest. You cannot get out of that because there's no maneuver. I mean, if you can, you just got to pay it all, and you don't do it. Even the Russell Wilson contract, which was a total albatross. If it was not for Deshaun Watson's contract, the Russell contract would be the gold standard of horrendous contracts, and they got out of it. So we're talking about a $39 million that they're paying Russell Wilson this year, and I think it was like $49 a year or whatever, and they got out of it. We're talking about giving DeAndre $6 this year, $4 next year. You can absorb that.
I guess it kind of depends how much, where does DeAndre feel like he's in his career in the winning situation? Like, is he feeling the
guys usually tell you by their actions how much winning really matters to them based upon what they're getting offered somewhere else. Like Derrick Henry went on Bussin' with the Boys, and he was like, I want to win a ring. I'm probably going to leave the Titans. I want to win a ring. And he went to the Ravens. And the other team he wanted to go to was the Cowboys, and the Cowboys weren't interested. And so it tells me, and I don't know if Derrick had better offers somewhere else. Like, I don't know if Carolina looked at Derrick Henry and said, hey, let's give Derrick $12 million a year because we want to take the pressure off of Bryce Young. And Derrick said, no, I'd rather take 8 in Baltimore. I have no idea. But Derrick clearly prioritized winning by going to the Ravens. Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco, where in 4 years in the NFL, he's played in 2 Super Bowls. Actually, he did not play in that first Super Bowl. Brandon Ayuk, who's played in 1 Super Bowl and played in 3 NFC championship games, Brandon Ayuk does not care about winning. Goes to the NFC title game every year. 4 NFC title games. 4 NFC title games for Brandon Ayuk. He goes to the championship game every year. He's been to the Super Bowl. They lost in overtime, and he couldn't give a rat's ass. All he cares about is the contract. That's why he wants to go to Washington, because it's like, well, they got money, so I'll go to Washington because he doesn't care. I think DeAndre's history has shown us that winning comes second to him. I'm not saying he doesn't want to win, but I just think it's very apparent to me that winning comes second. That is not the priority, or else he wouldn't have been a Titan. Remember, he was working out a deal for like $4 million last year to go to Kansas City when OBJ signed for 15 with Baltimore, and then DeAndre was like, I'm not doing that. I can't do $4 million. And the 2 teams that were interested in him, that he was interested, Tennessee and New England. And those were not proud teams at the time. Gunnar says, I agree about Hopkins. He's one of those guys that's going to come out and go hard until he can't walk anymore, no matter how bad his team is. Lock him up for another 3 years, Gunner says. He's only 32, not 36. I think I like playing year to year with Hopkins, which is let's give him an extension for next year. And then this time next year, let's reevaluate. But, you know, you can give him a 3-year contract and it be so, I mean, you can get out of it where it's like, oh yeah, no, those other 2 years really aren't that, you know, they're not really that big of a deal. It's not that, you know, he'll be fine. Trent says they absolutely need to re-sign him. And it's also important what he means to Will Levis. I think that Will Levis and Hopkins have a very good relationship. And I don't take that for granted.
Do you worry it could like slow the development of like some homegrown wide receivers, like the future of the position? It's old.
Yeah, but who's on the team?
I know they don't have anybody.
You're worried about Kyle Phillips.
I know they don't have anybody currently, but it takes up a spot to develop somebody.
Well, again, you can get out of this. I mean,
yeah,
you can get out of it if you want. They were still interested in drafting Malik Neighbors even after they had signed Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins was on the team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they would have drafted Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison if they were there at 7. And so I do not have, to me, if you get to next year and you're owing DeAndre $4 million on an $18 million contract and you decide you don't want DeAndre anymore, you can get out of that. Chances are you can probably trade him, but if you can't trade him, that's fine. You can release him. Arizona did it when they didn't want him anymore. So I think you'll be okay. 615-737-1025. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but there was kind of a news nugget at the top of Brian Callahan's training camp press conference today that is now put up or shut up time. Explain what that is. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
What's the latest with T'Vondre Sweat? I know coming back, conditioning and all that. How did he fare?
He looks good. He looks ready to roll. Don't expect any issues as we get started. He should be dressed and practicing and ready to play football.
That was Brian Callahan. He says T'Vondre Sweat is good to go. And I noticed this when I was on vacation. I still got the little notifications, Ian. I still got your emails about what was being talked about.
Okay.
And one of these shows where you filled in, or not you, but when somebody filled in for me, I was reading, and it was, what does T'Vondre Sweat have to do at training camp so Jared doesn't bitch about it? And I actually
sounds about right. Yep.
Think that's a pretty good topic. And so, I mean, I don't really know exactly what T'Vondre Sweat has to do in order for me not to complain. I'll just put it to you like this. He's got to prove he's worth the 38th pick. And that's a very loaded statement. I mean, the 38th pick, you're closer to the first round than you are to the end of the second round when you're 38. You need an impact player. It's like Rick Spielman, the GM that Paul says sucks, who just his last 2 first-round draft picks have both signed for over $100 million. It's like Rick Spielman said when they drafted him. You need guys, when you're picking 38th, you need guys that affect the quarterback on third down and in the fourth quarter. Let's see. Let's see that big body. He was 380 at Texas. They said he cannot be 380 in the NFL. They said at the combine he was 366. Again, Brian Callahan says he's good to go. Let's see tomorrow. He says he's a Hall of Famer if he's 350, which is a hot take, but we like those, so that's okay. I mean, I am looking at him, and I'm looking at T'Vondre Sweat, and I'm like, okay, you need to be a star. Because you need to prove that you are A, worth the 38th overall pick, B, worth the trade that I believe the Rams offered that you turned down, which included a second rounder in next year's draft and a second rounder this year. You got to prove that you're worth that. That was a massive package. I think they said that was like the biggest overpay in the second round that's been made in a decade. And the Titans, I believe, based off of the video the Rams put out there, the Titans turned that trade down. Carolina at 39 took that trade. I got to believe that they turned it down. So they must just love you if they turn down that offer. He's got to prove he's worth the red flags. There are questions I saw in the Athlon football guide that they put out at the grocery store and Walgreens and CVS. It's a very, very chic magazine. And they have, kind of what opposing scouts say about certain. And one scout said, we took him off our board because it's not just the DWI, but it's just other stuff. And that scout said, hey, we love, but nope, we're taking him off. The GM that told The Athletic told Mike Sando and said, this guy will break your heart. Now's the opportunity for him to prove that he's worth it. And finally, he's got to prove that he's going to be able to replace Danico's 11.5 sacks. Because 11.5 sacks walked out the door, and this is the replacement. Sebastian Joseph Day is not a sacker. Rand was asked about all the defensive linemen today, about all these other guys, TK McClendon and Quentin Bohanna and Keandre Coburn. And I'm like, guys, those are Scarbinis. Marlon Davidson, those are Scarbinis. The guys that are going to win you football games are Landry, Simmons, and Sweat. And I'm going to say something about Simmons. It's time for the production on paper to match what everybody says about Simmons, what he's paid, and what he's capable of. This was Rand when he was asked about the defensive line today, and he brought up those Scarbinis and Simmons. Here's what he said.
Defensive line, aside from Jeff, even in years past, it's always been a group that's been deep and a group that's had a lot of, guys who have experience like Danico. You don't have as much of that this year. What's your evaluation of some of these up-and-coming guys like McClendon and Bohanna that maybe getting more of a shot this year?
Yeah, I mean, they get their opportunity. It's just like everything else, like you said in the past. You've had a bunch of great D linemen, but even those guys at some point were young and had to prove themselves and earn the spot. And it's just the way the league rolls. It's I don't want to say this sounds bad, but like kind of out with the old in with the new. These guys get their opportunity, and I know TK's up for the challenge. I know Big Q and Coburn, like all those guys, and Marlon Davidson. These guys want opportunities, and they're going to have the opportunity to do so. I think all these guys grew this offseason. It's been good to see them run, going out there a little bit ago and seeing these guys move around, and you can tell it's a different group. I think it doesn't get talked about as much, but like Jeff's leadership, and the way he's like really, it was always like Jeff was the leader of the D-line group. And then now you feel Jeff is not only the leader of the D-line group and the defense, but the whole team, and you feel it and you see it. And, the way he goes is the way the group goes, just not in terms of on the field, but off the field as well, and how he handles his business. And so he set a great example for those guys, so they have something to follow.
Okay. I don't care about Coburn, McClendon, Bohanna, and Davidson. Those guys are all practice squad level players. Again, I use the word, and I mean it with love and respect, Scarbini. Forget about them. Those guys do not win you football games. Those guys can be on your team when you win football games, but they're not going to win them for you. And then there's Simmons. And there's all the things he said about Simmons. Jeff used to lead the D-line. Now he leads the team. Do you know that Jeffrey Simmons averages 7 sacks over the last 3 years? 8.5, 7.5, 5.5. Time to get to 10 sacks. And I also am not totally sold on Jeffrey Simmons either when I hear Rand talk about, hey, Jeff Simmons, he's the leader of the team, and the way he handles his business when he was crying and bitching about the media a couple of weeks ago over the Jamal Adams signing. And he will get asked about that tomorrow because I will be there. And so he will get asked about, hey, who are you mad at in the media? What did they say? Who was it? Honestly, it might be me. I don't think it is, but it might be. But when it comes to defensive line, I think the most important thing in the NFL is the quarterback. It's the passing game. Quarterbacks, receivers, tackles. And it is stopping the other team's passing game. And I hear you guys all, Jared, our secondary is going to be so improved with Snead and Awuzie. And I think McCreary's getting better and better. And so I do think those three are going to be good. If Snead, if those knees can hold up, I think there's a chance it'd be pretty good. But let me say this. You can have Deion Sanders, Champ Bailey, Sean Taylor, Brian Dawkins, and I'm trying to think who's like a Hall of Fame nickel. I can't think of like a specific guy who's a Hall of Fame nickel. So, I
don't know. It's a good question.
We'll just put Ty Law in there. And I know he wasn't a nickel, but we'll put him in there because he was so good. You can have that as your secondary. If you can't get to the quarterback, it doesn't matter. And in 2020, the Titans paid Jadeveon Clowney and they paid Vic Beasley, and those guys stunk. So they were left with Jack Crawford and Wyatt Ray and Derek Roberson. And again, what's the word we keep using here? Scarbinis. And so they had a bunch of Scarbinis to go with Landry and Simmons. And Landry and Simmons had to play every snap because there was nobody left on the team. Daquan Jones stunk at that point. And it was the worst Titans defense since Chuck Cecil was the coordinator. And the Titans had a Super Bowl caliber offense and got bounced in the wild card round because it couldn't get to the quarterback. And so you've got to get to the quarterback. And Danico, and I would say for all his faults, but he had no faults. Danico got to the quarterback. He averaged 9.5 sacks a year. He had 11.5 sacks last year. He was disruptive. He was consistent. He was reliable, and he's gone. So now, Jeffrey Simmons, who makes the money, who talks the talk, who gets the accolades, who goes on Rich Eisen and complains that the Titans don't get enough love, who complains about the local media, which if I had to rank them in terms of the toughest local medias in the NFL is probably like 27th, compared to Chicago and New York and Boston and those kind of places. It's time for those guys to show that they're worth the investment. And it's time when it comes to Sweat. I mean, it's not just him, but it's Brinker. It's Ram. It's even Brian Callahan. They put their necks out for him. They said, oh, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay, let's see. And let's see him replace Danico Autry. And let's see him replace those 11 and a half sacks. And if he does it, good for him. But what I'm not doing is I'm not sitting here and saying, oh, no, it'll be okay because of Coburn, McClendon, Bohanna, and Davidson. I'm sorry. I can get those guys off the practice squad. You want to know how I know I can get them off the practice squad? Hey, Ian, you want to know where those guys came from?
Where's that?
The practice squad. You are not going to win when the second most important part of your team behind your own passing game is built off of guys from the practice squad. So, again, I'm glad Brian Callahan says T'Vondre Sweat is good to go. We will be watching him very closely in camp because they think he's all that in a bag of chips. Well, he needs to be all that in a bag of chips. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So there are two separate things that were said, one by Rand, one by Brian Callahan. And these two players could literally score a touchdown every time they catch the ball in training camp, and I will not get excited about it. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game. That phone number again, 615-737-1025. Here on our program, tune in to 94.9 The Fan as the Sounds take on the Charlotte Knights. Pregame 6:20, first pitch 6:35. Sounds baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks Family Leisure, 5 Points Roofing, Caudle Vet Clinic, and Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. And this week's best deal is tickets for Home Run Derby X at First Horizon Park on Saturday, August 31st. Buy 2 tickets now for only $30 and watch MLB legends and top female players and local Middle Tennessee hitters compete in an exciting 3-on-3 co-ed competition. By the way, I heard in the commercial Alex Hugo is participating in that. I remember when she played at Georgia, and she was like Joe Burrow of women's softball. When she played at Georgia, she was a freaking stud. And she's going to be in that 3-on-3. Buy your tickets now at thegamenational.com/deals and be part of the Home Run Derby X excitement. Stillman and Company, the first training camp practice is tomorrow. I will be there. We'll have a full report. Now, the one thing I have said, I am not getting carried away. I am not getting carried away when it comes to practice. You know, Levis threw a touchdown. Levis threw 4 interceptions. It doesn't matter. If he screws up, they're working through it. If he's great, it's probably a sign that the defense isn't very good. We've done this too many times. We've gotten excited about things that we shouldn't get excited about. Now, bad, you can spot bad pretty quickly. But as far as getting excited, not going to happen. Last year, Christian Fulton said he had never been in camp on a defense that dominated the offense as much as last year's. Kevin Byard said he thought this was going to be a dominant defense. And I was like, no, I'm not doing this. So there are two guys that the coach and general manager seem to feel very strongly about. First, it was Brian Callahan being asked about the tight end room. And I did find his response interesting for one reason, but here's what he said.
How do you view the opportunity for snaps in the tight end room, especially with the three of Chig, Wiley, and Vanette?
Yeah, it's a room I'm excited about. I've really been impressed with Josh and Chig. Having Nick as a veteran presence, the guy that's done it for a long time, has been great. They're all going to get plenty of opportunities. I mean, it's not a room that is going to be dominated by one guy. Those guys are all going to help us. They all are going to have roles, and it allows us to be a little bit more multiple in a personnel grouping. So we can use all three of them. We can use two of them. We can use one of them. And they all have different skill sets. So it's sort of we're going to fill the tight end role with a lot of different players as opposed to maybe just one or two guys like some teams do. But they're also young too, then they're emerging. And so I'm excited to see what Josh does in training camp, how Chig comes along. So it's a fun group. I'm excited about them. They got great energy. And I think that they got a chance to really help our offense.
Ian, did you notice who got mentioned first both times?
Was it Wiley?
Wiley got mentioned ahead of Chig. I'm out on Chig. And last year at training camp, I watched Chig, and I thought Chig Okonkwo was going to be a top 10 tight end. I thought he was going to take that athleticism, and he was going to reel off big play after big play after big play last year. And then we got the games, and he couldn't catch. What's the old saying? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I am not buying the hype. Chig could catch every pass at training camp and run it into the end zone for a touchdown, and I would not get excited about it. But I do think it's fascinating that it sounds like Brian Callahan in his head has Wiley ahead of Chig. Now, Wiley, I just don't know if he can stay healthy or not. And then there was Rand Carthon and the guy that he was hyping up today.
Rand, there was a lot of discussion just around where Traylon stood with you guys during the offseason, during the spring, and just with the guys you guys brought in like Tyler and Calvin and whatnot. Just how have you seen him maybe handle all that to this point and just kind of his approach up to this point?
I think Traylon's really grown up. You know, he sent us a picture, you know, of during the offseason, this little break here, you know, showing his new physique. You know, he came in and he really took to heart, you know, the conversation that he had with myself and with Coach Callie. And he's completely bought in. I've, you know, messaged with him, you know, throughout the offseason. And I think he's in a really good spot. And, you know, again, we added Tyler and we added Calvin. Obviously, D-Hop was here, but for a young guy like that, he has vets that he can learn from. You know, and again, with him and his size and his speed and his explosiveness, and now, you know, he can be an X, he can be a Z. You know, Tyler's primary spot is probably going to be the F. You know what I mean? So I'm expecting, you know, things from him and just his unselfishness. I know it was some talk about him taking gunner reps, but that was because he wanted to, and he wants to prove that he can stay healthy and play top level football.
Okay, I'm very excited about Traylon Burks, he says. So the coach very excited about the tight end room, including Chig, and the GM very excited about Traylon Burks. And hey, Traylon can play everywhere. He can play the X, he can play the Y, he can play the Z, you know, all those things. Traylon Burks, just like Chig, could catch every single pass in training camp, and it's not going to make a difference for me. Because each of the last 2 years, I've seen training camp practices with Traylon Burks. that made me think the Titans had a budding superstar. I'm not going to fall for it again. So, again, what will happen is the whole media will be out at practice, and they'll do 7-on-7, and they'll do 11-on-11 team periods. And when they do those, Jim Wyatt will have his breakdown of every play. It'll be on the Titans website, which means it's not behind a paywall. He'll have the stats. Levis was 8 of 13 with 1 interception, and it was a ball that was batted in the air, and it was intended for so-and-so, and it was intercepted, and if you read, Chig was awesome. Burks was awesome. I mean, if they catch everything thrown their way, one-on-ones, they cooked L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie and Roger McCreary. I'm not taking the bait. I'm also not taking the bait on Kyle Phillips. You know, every single practice that's open, Joe Rexrode ends up walking away thinking that Kyle Phillips has become the new Wes Welker, and then he goes out in the games and he doesn't do it. I'm not buying into this stuff again. I've done that before. I'm not going to get excited about the same thing over and over and over and over again. I'm just not going to. So good luck to Chig. Good luck to Burks. And it would make life a lot easier for the Titans if those guys ended up being good. But we'll learn those things in the games. Because what sucks if you're a football player is that you spend every second of your life thinking about how you're a football player, and you get 17 cracks at it. And that's it. And so that's what it all comes down to. So training camp, you know, we'll have reports and we'll discuss and we'll see but I'm not getting carried away this year. I will not do it. That's going to do it for us. Tomorrow when we hop on the air at 2:00, we will have a full breakdown of the first training camp practice of the Brian Callahan era. No OTAs and mini camps, and those don't count. That's all just orientation. This is the start of the season tomorrow, and I can't wait. That's it for us. ESPN Radio is coming up next. See everybody tomorrow, too.